Welcome, everybody, to the Making Awesome podcast. This is episode 198, where we're talking with Mitch from Polar Filament, who didn't actually ever intend to make filament, but we're going to be talking all about filament. Mitch, I need the Backstreet Boys from you. Do you know
Do
this
you want,
one?
are you talking from like Deadpool or no?
No, I haven't seen that yet. So I need the who you are, the where you from, the what you did, and as long as you love me.
All right, as long as I don't have to dance.
No,
Um,
no, we don't do that here. I have danced on
okay,
camera before, but I'm not going to tell people in what video that is in.
beautiful. Yeah, so my name is Mitch. I'm one of the founders of Polar Filament. So you said who I am.
Hmm.
What was the next one?
Who you are, where you from, what you did.
All right, where I'm from. So I'm in the Metro Detroit area, which is in Michigan. This is like ground zero for the automotive industry. So pretty much everything that I'm going to be talking about is going to be heavily influenced by the big auto manufacturers and stuff, filament included. And then stuff that I do. So I am mostly in the R&D side of things for filament. I usually say that I do it once. I try to get something that works, and then I usually hand that off to the operations guys, and then they're gonna like repeat that over and over again. So I usually do problem solving. Whenever there's a problem, I get roped in. Whenever there's like a new like development thing that we need to figure out, I get roped into it, and then at that point, I usually turn it over.
Nice, nice. I understand this whole thing, and your goal, right, with Polar was not originally to produce filament. Can you give me the history of Polar Filament and kind of how it came to be?
Yeah, so actually, it goes a little further back before even Polar Filament existed. When we were getting started, there was a company called Douglas Electronics, I guess is what it was called. So that was something that I split off. I used to work at Kuka Robotics, and then I was just doing I was seeing a lot of like cost saving opportunities on the robots. And it was to the point where I was sinking so much of my time into building all these weird custom things that like my main focus, which was like autonomous driving, was kind of getting put in the back seat. And I had to make a decision like, hey, do I want to keep focusing on all of these like cost saving opportunities, which are basically money directly into the pockets of manufacturing, or do I want to focus on this other thing? So I had a lot more fun kind of like taking these really expensive things and ripping them apart. Like when you're in the industrial world, things cost thousands of dollars. It'll be like, hey, this RFID scanner or this RFID sensor, all it does is read an RFID tag and it costs $1,200. I'm like, all right, I'll go on Amazon. You're like, how does RFID work? And then you're like, all right, cool. You can buy a little chip for $5. And it's like, okay, can I build something between $5 and $1,200? So it's like a pretty easy kind of like target to achieve, but it does take a lot of time and a lot of testing. So that was where it's not just like buy this thing and put it on. That's the difference between hobbyist and industrial. Is industrial always works.
And you
So that
pay
was
for
anyway.
that. You
Oh yeah,
absolutely pay for that.
absolutely. So everything was electronics getting started, and then 3D printing wasn't even involved until we started to need enclosures. That was kind of the next side of things, is doing all these development revisions, and we needed enclosures to put stuff in. So we started 3D printing them, and then that continued to grow to the point where we were just a print farm. That like the electronics almost got the back seat. We started making enclosures not only for us but also for our competitors, for enclosures and parts and robots and just pretty much any sort of custom fixture.
Yep.
Because once again, in the industrial world, things are usually in the scale of like tens to hundreds, but not like thousands. When you get into thousands, then you mass produce it, you injection mold it. But it was really that sweet spot for 3D printing.
Even in the
So
low
we had,
thousands, you can probably still. We say like normally for injection molding, like the base MOQ is like 5,000 parts. If you
yep, I
can't
always
hit
say
5,000
5,000.
parts, you should really be looking at 3D printing. Well, yes, it's going to be more expensive per part. You don't have that crazy high upfront mold cost, which will eat away profit margins. It is, yeah, but that cavity between the one part and the 5,000 parts is very large, and 3D printing has kind of brought that quite a bit closer.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it takes away your freedom to make changes, which happen all the time. I mean, the nice part about rapid prototyping is that you can kind of get something out there. And then if you see, ooh, I wish I made this just a little bit better, then you can make a change, and you can call it like version 1.2 or something like that. And you don't have to start all over or say, hey, I just have to live with it now.
Dude, that was my Wednesday video completely, where, you know, we had, this was version 1. Version 2, I added a Prusa spool holder on. I said, great, we're done. Let's start filming the video. I put everything together. I'm like, crap. It's not right. That whole bit in the video about us having to do the redesign was not intended. That was not supposed to be there, because the intention was this was going to work the first, you know, that first try. But I made a key mistake in the designing in that I didn't account for the size of the curtain. I accounted for the curtain run, everything like that. I did not account for the size of the curtain. And that is something that, all right, mistake was made. Now I get to show that process on camera. It kind of worked out. That video did not do as well as we thought it was going to do. But, you know, it was just one of those, yep, been there. And rapid prototype, it was great because before we wrapped filming on that video, I already had enough to do half of one of the runs done because they're so fast to produce.
Yeah, the ones that kill me the most are the ones that they're not wrong. They don't not work. It's just like you see a way to do it better, and you're like, oh, I could just make it a little bit better. This would make my life a little bit easier.
Yep.
But is it worth redesigning it for? So it's super cool when you get to do that with 3D printing and like not with other things.
All I had to do was move this out by 30 millimeters. That's all I had to do, right? To make it fit, it was a 30 millimeter move. I said, but what if I drop it 30 millimeters? Oh, I can put another Prusa spool holder up here. It's a Prusa frame, so you can click a Prusa spool holder into it. That's what we use for all of our spool mounts, because we standardized on that years ago. I'm like, well, damn, if I move that, now I have more flexibility and expandability for my project, which is, from a business standpoint, incredibly valuable. Extra flexibility becomes very valuable from a business standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of those spool holders, I have one I got to show you that works with the racks that you have behind. I made it like that locks into the actual shape of those, the cross beams.
Like this.
Yours looks like it holds onto the cross beam. Mine's holds onto the vertical. So like in the same way that the cross beams go into those weird like triangular shaped slots to hold in. Built one that goes on there, and then it just uses a standard 6-foot like black iron pipe that you run across, and it works great for like 5-kilogram spools and stuff like that. So it's a nice, easy way to get something from Home Depot that you don't have to make super custom, and everyone seems to have those Husky shelves. So
these are the ones specifically from Sam's, and the weird thing is they're all just a little bit different, right? Yep. So I haven't done it yet. I need to do it. I was going to release the base step file for this to our paying members, because I know there are people that could use it. Yeah, it holds a lot from this little edge, but once that edge clicks in, it pulls it up against the front, and it seems like I've put 10 kilos on it and it hasn't broken, and it's PLA, and I'm very happy with that. For my purposes, that's well beyond what they're ever going to do. So
oh yeah,
yeah, it is quite an interesting thing, and rapid prototyping iteration makes this valuable, because if you do decide to go to production, let's say you go to that injection mold, you've already done all the BS to get there. You don't have to do it on your mold side, which is so much cheaper.
Absolutely.
Real quick, Russ, thank you for the $20 super chat, sir. Thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. And hey, let's get some shout outs to people hanging out here in the chat. Reth is here. Mad Cat USA, Max H, Mike from Never Let the Machines Win is here. Matrix Tech, Justin Miller. Who else we got? Duff, James the Printer, Maker Viking, William Henry. Is that all? And Mitch 3D, the other Mitch. We were laughing before going live, Mitch, that the last person that I had on here as a guest was also named Mitch, so I didn't have to change the name card at the bottom. So that was very, very nice. And we will, I'm told, some little birdies tell me that we might have some giveaways here throughout the episode. So if that is your kind of thing, make sure to stay tuned, because you will have to be here to receive it.
Yeah, who's here in the Polar Filament Discord? If you are, like, say something, drop like a polar bear emoji if that exists.
I don't know if that's possible inside of YouTube, but
I think it is. I think there's a polar bear emoji, right?
On YouTube?
Yeah, I think so. Hold on. I got it open.
I don't know if there is. Is there?
Hold on. Look at
Drop it
that.
so
Look at
everybody
that.
else can. Oh, there is. um, if you have your invite handy, drop it. You know what? I'm gonna make you a mod, and that will allow you to post links. So you can drop a link to your Discord when you're ready to drop the giveaway link. People can go ahead and sign up for that, and I'll pin it.
Yep.
If you
I'll
want,
do that in
put them
just a
both
sec.
in
I
the
still have
same
to name the
message,
form.
and I'll pin them both.
That works for me. It's a single question. I got to figure out how to actually require somebody's name in here. What is your username? Actually, I should probably get an email so I can contact somebody.
Yep.
What is your
Emails, or I just tell
email?
people to reach out to me. That's so far been a decent way of doing it.
All right. I'll finish that in a sec, though.
Yeah,
But
you're good. You're good.
I think I was halfway through a story and then I got distracted.
This is a very common
Um,
problem that we have. Don't worry.
yep. All right, I will try to finish this up before I jump into something else. The story of the where Polar Filament came from. We're doing a bunch of industrial 3D prints. We grew a print farm, and that was where I'm sure a bunch of people here have a print farm. Which I mean, you can have a print farm being one printer that runs nonstop, or you can have a small handful of printers, or you can have rooms full of printers. You're all going to deal with kind of the same problems. That's where you deal with different requirements than what a normal hobbyist is going to work with requirements and colors and reliability and stuff like that. Um, but I'm sure tons of people know here that it's really, really hard to be consistent and find something that's reliable. And it's pretty embarrassing if you do basically if you get something like if you get bad filament and then you make a part that's different and then you give it to your customer and then they complain about it. It's just embarrassing. It seems like something that should be a lot easier to solve than it actually is. And we really dealt with that quite a bit to the point where we were ordering a lot of stuff from both the US. We were getting stuff from the US and we were getting like different materials. It felt like we were just getting two completely different filaments. We source stuff from overseas, and then when those would come in, sometimes they would just be like the wrong color, and it really stinks when you wait like a month or two for an entire batch of like hundreds of spools, and then they show up and you ordered like orange and then green ones show up, and you know that you have to wait another 2 months and go turn around and tell your customer, hey, it's going to take another 2 months before we can even get started on this job.
Yeah, they're not fans of that. Customers are
No.
not fans of like, yeah, so we're gonna need a bunch more time. You said it was gonna be done at this time.
Yep.
Oh, it's the worst.
It defeats the whole point of rapid prototyping and what
Yep.
3D printers are good at. If you're like, hey, they're like, hey, we want a couple hundred of these things. And I say, cool, wait 4 months or something. And that defeats the whole purpose. So like you should
Yep.
really be dragging and dropping it. And from within minutes of somebody saying, I want this, it should be already being produced, especially with how fast printers are now. Like from the time that you have an idea to the time that it's in your hand should be hours, not days or weeks or months.
Unless the
And
part's
that,
really big, then days
yeah,
or weeks are totally fine. But yeah, size dependent, obviously. And further, we were talking about the injection molding versus additive here, and you might say, well, Grant, I can get an injection molded part in seconds. Yeah, go ahead and try to get that mold cut. See how long that takes. Most shops are running like a 3 to 4 week lead time out here, and that's if you have the money to get a 3 to 4 week lead time. Otherwise, you're at least a month and a half to 2 months. So, yeah, 3D printing has a lot of value in industry.
Yep. And that was kind of what drove us to solve that problem, kind of the really aggressive way. And it was like, all right, we didn't really want to make our own filament because, like, the one thing that I learned early on in research is that you can't just make small amounts of filament. You don't make enough for you. You need to make enough for everything. And we just happened to have like a really, really big project with a really weird custom material. It was kind of like a TPU, where it was going to cost us an unbelievable amount of money to just buy the filament. And that was our last little kick in the butt that we needed to say, like, all right, we're going to try this on our own. We're going to see if we can figure it out. And it was tricky. There's a lot of like learning, took years to learn what was going on. But after that, then we kind of had the process down. We were making our own filament. We basically paid off the upfront costs that we needed to. And when everything was starting to kind of calm down, that was when we're like, all right, we're running a filament line like 2 hours we could make enough filament that we would use for the entire week. So we're like, all right, we've got all this extra capacity. We're like, let's try selling it. I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't need to work. I mean, we're not trying to force things down other people's throats and say, hey, you need to buy this filament so we can exist. The base case was already kind of solved. So at that point, we just started opening up the doors and we're like, hey, here's a website with a password protected site just so we could kind of control who could have access to it. And then that continued to grow. And then we went to our first rep festival where I saw tons of cool people. And that was where we finally opened it up to be truly public. And that's where the Polar Filament brand came from, because nobody wanted to buy filament from Douglas Innovation. That's not a good filament company. So Polar Filament's just a brand. It's not actually the company.
Yeah, you guys, was it Rocky Mountain
No, it
2023?
was the Midwest Rep Festival. So I just showed
Okay,
up. We had an intern who had been there before, and he convinced me to just kind of go. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know there was a Facebook page. I just knew to show up. So we didn't show up as like a vendor or anything. I showed up as a participant. But they let us set up a booth. So that actually worked nicely. So we had that. That was where I've got like my famous little story of we never had to deal with colors, both as a print farm and as a manufacturer. Everything in the industrial world is usually either black, white, or like one of very, very few colors. It'll be like safety orange, safety yellow,
gray.
and we never did a whole lot of gray.
Oh,
It
we
was
get a
usually just
ton
either
of gray.
black or white.
We get
I
a
do a lot
ton
of
of
gray
gray.
now. But we ended up having, I think, like 5 color swatches. I think we had
Mhm.
5 colors. It was like black, white, red, yellow, blue, or something like that. And somebody came up to our booth and they're like, "Oh, what color blues do you make?" And I was like, "Blue with an S, multiple blues. Why would you need more than one blue?" Um, and then walking
Yep.
around and seeing all the other booths and stuff and seeing that everybody else had these like rainbow of colors. And it wasn't just what blue do I like this blue or not? It's like, do I like any of these 4 or 5 blues that they have to offer? So that was kind of the next kick in the butt to explore colors, which was actually a really long process because you can't make the fun colors, the really cool novelty, the stuff that sets you apart until you have the baseline. Like you can't get into like a really niche like tan color until you've got like purple. Like
Yep.
that's a pretty basic color. So we had to, and it turns out there's a lot of basic colors too. So you got to get like a light green and dark green, a light blue and a dark blue, and a handful of those before you can start getting into the other fun stuff. And I think right now we have right around 40 normal colors, and we're just now starting to get into the novelty stuff like the sparklies and the silks and color changing and stuff like that. Oh yeah,
I'm showing what you have coined silk-ish. This is
yes,
it is in the experimental line for Polar Filament, but it is a red silk. I have a yellow silk as well, and I mean they're still sealed, so I haven't printed with them yet. But you want to make this like double the shiny or triple the shiny. I'm like, this is already pretty darn shiny. I'm excited for it. I think if I get it close enough, it might reflect some light into my face already. But this is a really really nice red, and I like kind of the crazy colors. And you also just put out. It's cold enough in here that it's all blue, but this is a thermochromic material, so it goes from like a clear regular color to a dark blue, depending on how
yep,
cold it is, which is super cool. Um, and then I picked up some Sapphire because that is
yep.
your fluorescent blue, which one, love the blue, right? Gotta love the blue, but two, fluorescent. I love fluorescence.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
semi-translucent too. So when you print stuff, if you intentionally print it with a low infill, you can see just a little bit on the inside. It kind of has like a gemstone look to it. So that was unintentional, but a lot of the fluorescents are naturally a little bit more translucent. They let more color shine through them, so they're not as flat and opaque, which lets the
yep,
the fluorescents really pop. So one of the side effects of that is that they're a little bit like just a little bit. They're not see-through. They're not translucent or transparent. They're just enough to let some light through.
yeah, which is great in my book, right? Anything that's just a little bit different, right? Anyone can go buy generic colors of filament. Every manufacturer makes it, and in today's day and age, they're pretty much roughly all within 5 to 10% of each other. Even the crappy ones are getting better, right? But if you are running it as a business, consistency is what is key here. Even if it's consistently mediocre, consistency is key, because it is something that you can bet on. You're able to bet that, all right, this product takes 10 kilos. I know statistically that I'm going to have one failure, so let me go ahead and order 11 kilos to be safe. But you know what? I want a couple in inventory, and I can get a volume discount at 15. Let's go ahead and order 15, and then you have some for the next project. And if there are any other issues, you're betting on the fact that life is going to work well, and that's how you end up with 400 kilos in inventory.
Yep.
Very quickly. Yeah, and you guys know nothing about having a ton of filament inventory, right? You know, you're doing a ton these days.
Yeah, it's actually getting really rough right now because our building is like packed. Not only do we make Polar filament, but we also make other brands of filament. And the more popular Polar gets, the more other brands start trickling in and saying, hey, can you manufacture for us? The one thing that I always hear everybody online like talk about different brands and saying like, hey, this brand is the best I've ever used. This brand is the worst I've ever used. And you'll have two people that like will say, hey, did they change something? I had a bunch of rolls and then it feels like they switched. And the answer is that it's like a giant mishmash of manufacturing. So
Yep.
generally speaking, there's a brand which sells filament, and then there's the manufacturers which manufacture filament. And there is not a one-to-one correlation. So like with Polar filament, we're manufacturing it and selling it. And honestly, that's kind of the oddball. It's not like a at scale approach. Usually, if you're good at making filament, you probably don't have the same skill set to sell or brand filament, which is probably showing with the stuff that we do. I mean, we have pretty mediocre like advertising and like online presence and stuff like that, because I'm focusing on making good filament, not focusing on trying to make our existing stuff look fancier than it actually is. But that being said, we manufacture for other brands, but that doesn't mean that that brand gets all of their stuff from us. So a brand will typically source out their filament to 5 or 6 different manufacturers, which is why you might get a spool of white that works and a spool of blue that doesn't, because they could come from 2 completely different factories with 2 different practices. And it's really confusing to the consumer. Which that's one of the reasons why I put a lot of the analytics on our spools, because like I want to say, hey, regardless of where it's coming from, here's what information was done while manufacturing it, so you can at least hold people to their word.
So
Yeah,
I'm going to hold up one of my spools, and if you're listening back audio only, I'm sorry. But if you're watching us live or watching it on YouTube, you can scan that QR code and learn more about this spool of Magic Color, which is their thermochromic material. And like you're providing real data, right? I can see that the spool was made on June 26th of 2024 at 12:47 p.m. It has a tolerance of plus or minus 0.03 millimeters and ovality of 0.5%. That is all there. And then you're saying, well, hey, if you want more info, you can scan that QR code and get it. And as far as I'm aware, there's only one other manufacturer that does that. And it is my preference to be able to see that data, because that data is incredibly valuable. Because it's not useful currently, but there's absolutely an ability. I don't know if anyone's going to implement it, but it's something that I've always said we could implement this. If we get good enough data from the spools, you can, on demand, adjust your extrusion multiplier so you are always dead on perfect, because your spool is going to have fluctuation. There's no way to make it perfect. It is always going to have fluctuations. So how can your machine accommodate that? Because even small amounts of fluctuation in diameter and ovality will start to matter, especially on the lighter materials, like a white filament with a lot of that titanium dioxide in it. You'll notice slight diameter changes in the filament because all of a sudden you're extruding more than you thought you were, and you'll notice it in the prints themselves, which can be...
Yeah, from my end for the analytics, it's more of like an accountability thing. I know a lot of people look at it, they go, that's very cool that you're paying attention to that, and now I trust you more. But I'm not going to verify it. They like don't double check it necessarily. I see a lot of people will like scan a QR code like once just to look at it and go, that's cool, and then they have peace of mind knowing that like, hey, at least somebody's paying attention to this type thing.
Yeah,
if you're not measuring it and not recording it, then you could do anything.
Well, and if we just put it all out there, they know that we're honest about it, which, you know, that is that instant kind of trust factor, right? That is incredibly valuable, again, from a business. And I'm being told that Clipper can apparently do this, because of course Clipper can do it. But all Clipper actually needs is a user-friendly way to use it. Then all of a sudden, you know, maybe we'll see using Clipper in our shop more often, but it's not user-friendly. I have bones to pick with Clipper. It is great when you know it. But that, man, that wall to get there, that learning curve is a freaking vertical wall, and it is a tough climb, well above my current climbing abilities, or
Yep.
skill set, I should say.
Yeah, there's actually a lot more data too that we measure that we don't display, which is sometimes like most of it's like it doesn't matter. Some of it's a little bit of trade secret, so we don't like release that. Some of it's stuff that probably doesn't matter. Like an example of something that probably doesn't matter is we record how many steps our stepper motor is running that actually injects the color into the filament. So that way we can actually control different like color consistencies between batches and stuff like that, to make sure. So if we're ever curious, like everything is documented. We have color recipes and stuff that's all like historical,
Yep.
and we have all of the old versions and how the recipes are being made. But if we ever are curious about like, hey, I know we ran this one batch one day with a different recipe just to see how it went. How did it go? Then I can like go look it up and see like, all right, how much color were we pumping into it? How fast were we running that day? What was the humidity of the air of the shop that we were in that day? Stuff like that is also recorded. New things are they're popping up. So like I'm in once again the R&D side of things. So my job is to come up with something once, decide if it matters, see if it's worth it. And one is the spool weight. So the weights of our cardboard spools are pretty consistent, down to like 1 or 2 grams, even with the glue. So like those ones are not something I'm worried about. I can say, hey, with pretty good confidence, if you have a spool from us, this is what the empty spool actually weighs. But now that we're getting into like 5, 8, and 10 kilogram spools, they vary by like hundreds of grams, like 200 grams even. So I've got some that weigh like 600 grams and some that weigh like 800 grams. So right now what we're doing is we weigh every single spool. We take a black Sharpie and write on it in like a pretty hidden spot, because I don't want other people to I don't want it to look bad, I guess. But then we've got the weight written on there, and then we weigh every spool afterwards. And that's something that we want to kind of take the human aspect out of
Yeah.
and have something automatically weigh it. So that way we don't have to, and then we can check it as well. So like put an empty spool on this scale, have it automatically just record what that data is, and we load it up, weigh it again, and then now you can see what percentage is actually on your spool. And that's one of those things that's always kind of scary when you do it for the first time, because you ask yourself the question, what happens if things are not going how I think they're currently going? So right now, I'm fairly confident that every single spool is the correct weight.
Right.
That you're getting at least 1 kilogram. We always shoot for like, if it's under 1,000 grams, then we don't sell it as a full kilogram. If it's like, we usually shoot for about 1,005 grams, just to make sure that it's a little bit over the top, just to make sure we're not shorting anybody. But obviously it's in my best interest to not super overload it. We don't want to put like 1,100 grams on it, because then
It does eat into profit
make.
margins. That little bit over thousands of spools does add up to being a meaningful amount on the bottom line.
Yep. But I just always have that thing, like when you're not measuring it, you kind of have a little bit of kind of this like blissful ignorance of like, hey, everything's fine. I measure, usually we measure the first couple of spools at the beginning to dial in the weight to make sure it's perfect. And then we measure every like 10th or something spool, like every 10 spools or something. We'll just measure it just to make sure something's not going wrong. But as soon as you start measuring every spool, then you're catching every little detail. And it's just like, hey, is it even possible for it to be like 1,005, 1,005, 1,005, 1,005, 995, and then go back to 1,005? Is that possible? And it's like, well, until you actually measure it, you don't actually know. So once you hook up all this stuff is usually where you kind of like realize your shortcomings. We were doing that a lot with like color consistency, seeing how consistent our color was, and seeing how much the humidity in the air actually impacts how well colors mix together. So that's like one of those things that until you actually start measuring it, you're like, well, it should be the same because we're doing the same thing every time. We should be getting the same results. And then you measure it and you realize, oh, maybe it wasn't as straightforward as I thought it was.
Yeah, when it comes to humidity, yep, got a ton of that here, and it's been one of those fun challenges, especially with materials. And I say this as there's currently I don't know what the heck they're calling it at this point because it's not strong enough to be a tropical storm. It's right on the bottom end of a tropical storm, so I think it's a tropical depression. But we're calling it here in Florida. Little Debbie is right off the coast, and we have about 20-mile-an-hour winds right now outside. So if anyone is watching us and you notice that the lights above me go out, they're the only things in this shop that aren't on a battery backup. So we'll be fine. We'll make it through if we lose power, but just so you know, there is currently an active storm in the Gulf of Mexico that is looking to dump anywhere between 8 inches and 2 feet of water on us in the next 24 hours. And those are not guy numbers. Those are like meteorology numbers, okay? So humidity here is going to be simply described as yes. And that's even an issue when you start printing material. And I'm not talking about bubbles and strings and that. Color. Certain colors we find get degraded during a moisture-based process. Like if it's just sitting out, especially in my garage. Grays. Specifically the eSun Matte Gray PLA breaks down in moisture. We don't know why it does it, but it does. That's been a weird one for us. So I can't use that material in any of the printers outside. Why? I don't have answers to that. But even after the spool is made, humidity can be a pretty serious problem, if you will. We had a question from the audience here from MadCat USA saying, what about TD values for HueForge? Will that be on the spools? Is that a potential plan for the future?
Yes, that's something that we've been working on now for about a year. Turns out it's really, really, really hard to do. So the TD values that come with, I mean, anyone that uses HueForge realizes how like subjective things can be. And then as soon as you get into actually measuring it,
Yep.
the part that you're measuring is not necessarily the transmission distance. You're measuring kind of how much light is shining through an object. So one good example is if you're shining a light through and you've got a light sensor on the other end. Oh, I lost my camera there. Gotta fix that.
That's
Goes
fine.
out every 30 minutes. It likes to go to sleep.
Oh, it's a Sony camera.
It's a Nikon, actually.
Oh, it's a Nikon. Okay.
Yep.
That's fine. We get color bar Mitch every now and then.
Yep. That's our 30 second or 30-minute mark. So
It's
wait until 1 p.m. here, and then we'll get the next one. But yeah, so you're measuring basically how much light you are seeing through it. But if your light source is not as bright as you thought it was, or if it's dusty, or if it's overpowered and is too bright, then you're going to get a higher or lower reading, which has nothing to do with the plastic at all. So really what it comes down to is trying to find a standardized way. So if I build 2 of these sensors, how do I make sure that these 2 are doing the exact same thing? I do have one of the TD ones that I got from the Rocky Mountain Rep Festival. So the guys over at HueForge, it wasn't Ajax that gave it to me specifically. I think it was somebody else. But anyway, we tinkered around with that. I kind of looked at it and like realized that the goal of that was to be like the primary goal seems to be making it affordable enough that a person can just buy it.
Yep.
And that's not what I care about, really. I care about it being as consistent and as perfect as possible, kind of regardless of the cost. So I'm taking a very different approach at how I kind of develop this thing, but it's taking a lot longer than I expected.
We discussed this with Ajax, and I'm happy to connect the two of you if you're not connected, but he is looking at a more business-focused one for people that do produce filament that will be considerably more accurate. You know, his is currently good enough, and that his goal was to be able to hit a price point that made sense, because if one of the other sensors that he was looking at, its base cost is $40. And so if you're trying to sell a circuit board with that $40 sensor and an enclosure and all that, and still make profit on it, you're probably selling it in the $150 to $200 range to start. And then he was talking about, well, we could do multiple sensors, do an average between them, and now you're looking at $400, $500, $600, $700, and that is only in the realm of manufacturers. Then we talked about things like wear. Like, how are you going to deal with the fact that filament is ringing through this as fast as it humanly can? How are you going to deal with the input and output not getting just blown apart by technically not abrasive filament, but anything moving that fast is going to abrade over time?
Yep.
So,
Vibrations are killer too, just because of
yep.
if it's perfectly circular, you're shining light through one direction and it likes to kind of scatter. So if it's moving a little bit too far to the left or too far to the right, it's kind of shooting off the light, not to the same part of the sensor. So that could be the same color light, just a different intensity of it. So there's a lot of vibrations in a filament line, and they seem to like come and go almost like randomly. Like you sit there and you get everything just right, and everything is fine and not vibrating, but then all of a sudden vibrations will start to kick up over after like 6, 7, 8, 9 hours or something when you run it. And if you go back through and check again for vibrations, it's weird little spots that pop up again. So I don't want that to affect the color.
Agreed. Yeah, color can be a bit of a challenge in that sense, and something that a lot of manufacturers don't check, and something that I've even noticed across even very, very expensive filament manufacturers, is that if you're not dosing the right amount of color all the time, or maybe there's just a little bit less that gets pushed, you can see actual differences in that color as you're printing it. For most people, you're not doing a big enough print to notice it. But if you're doing prints that are multiple kilos, or you have a 5 kilo roll, it is relatively likely that there will be some variance in the color. And if your client, right, because you're not generally buying a 5 kilo roll for a hobby, okay, so I'm going to look at this on the small business side. Your client, if they have a specific color demand, that can be a problem because, again, you're delivering a product that doesn't meet the needs of your client. And then you get into this problem of, well, I don't know what to do. You guys were literally dealing with this. So you said, F it, we're going to do it ourselves so we can control it. And in fact, hilariously, they've been talking about one that I don't know if you want to talk about it much, but in the comments or in the chat, we've been talking about TPU. I know TPU is a bit of a one that's been close to your heart for a while because you were doing short value testing, weren't you?
Yeah, so actually TPU is the reason that Polar Filament started existing, because there was a very specific TPU that existed. We loved it, and now it doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
And that was one of those things that we were watching it kind of phase its way out, and that was one of our customers' favorite things. Basically, it's a very, very hard TPU. It's essentially, if you print a solid part, it just feels like PLA. The difference is that you can chuck it at the ground, you can hit it with a hammer, and it has just enough impact resistance that it's not gonna crack apart on you. So that was basically, it was a knockoff company was trying to take basically a shortcut into TPU, and they're like, hey, we're calling this TPU even though it's basically just a soft PLA. And they lied about what it was, but it was a very nice material nonetheless. So we started making our own stuff just because we needed to have something that kind of mimicked that. And actually, when we got started, we were using a TPU that was extremely, extremely expensive, but it worked, and we were just using it for ourselves.
Yep.
TPUs in general tend to be way more expensive than any other type of plastic as well. If you get into just something that happens to be soft, they tend to be a lot cheaper as well. I do know a bunch of soft plastics that can be added into PLA to make them softer, but those aren't things that I'm able to share yet. Maybe we will eventually, but right now the only TPU that I sell is that specific TPU that we were trying to recreate. So it's a 60D on the shore hardness scale.
And that's an actual 60D. That is not.
Yeah,
Oh, I have the Amazon promise that it's 60D. Right? You're measuring this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And honestly, if anyone here hasn't measured stuff, and if you want to drop like $20 on something that probably doesn't matter, you can get pretty decent TD measuring, or TD shore hardness measuring meters.
Wait,
they
for
come
20
in two
bucks?
different. Yeah. It's just basically the way that it works is it's a sharp needle, and it presses in. The needle is on a spring. The harder that it presses into the plastic, if the plastic is really soft, that needle goes in a lot more. It deforms the plastic and it moves out more. So then it says that it's a soft plastic. But if the material is resisting and it doesn't let the needle dive into it, then it compresses that spring, and then that represents a harder shore hardness.
Wow.
So
holy crap, they are really affordable. I'm seeing it on now. It's Amazon, so again, Amazon trust here, but freaking $30 on Amazon for sure. Damn it, Nick, this is why I hate having like really smart guests on, because all of a sudden they're gonna make me go and buy things for no valid. I need a shore hardness tester? No. Do I want a shore hardness test everything? Of course I do, because that's fun. And even further, it lets you hold manufacturers accountable. Because accountability matters so much. Because if your client is ordering, like we're seeing in here, Rose Kindred is looking at like an 85A. If they order in what they think is an 85A and it's like a 97A, that's a big difference in flexibility.
Yep. And the only difference between like the A and D scales is just the shape of that needle and the strength of the spring. So when you get to the D scale, you're testing harder material. So you need a sharper needle to penetrate. You need a stronger spring to kind of compress it more. So that's why those scales, like they don't have a 1-to-1 translation between the two. So like people always say, hey, what's 60D if you were on the A scale? And I'm like, well, technically caps out at 100, and 100 means 100% of the spring is pushed back into it. So you can't go anywhere beyond that. You can't have something that pushes a spring more than 100% into something. But if it was, it would be like 105-ish. At least when they're close, you can kind of measure what they are. But the part about 3D printing that's tough is printing it changes the shore hardness, kind of. Are you measuring the material or are you measuring your final print? Obviously, if you change your infill, if you do something like gyroid infill, which makes it a lot more uniform, then if you print at a smaller density, then more of the plastic is able to move out of the way, let that needle kind of push a little bit further into that plastic, and then it registers that it's a softer material.
Or you have 30 walls, right? Like,
yep.
Yeah, a 60D or, even an 85A with anything above 5 or 6 walls is going to act a lot closer to a 90, 95, or 100 just because you're adding so much material, and the way that filament is deposited, right, makes it non-homogeneous. You're dealing with layers on top of each other, and that often will also change the way that there's flexibility. Well before I met you, but I used to use a cane. I used a cane for about 2.5 years, maybe 3 years to walk. And cane handles suck. So I actually printed my own out of a crazy neon green TPU. And I'm like, oh, let me put my logo in it because that would be fun. It made it so stiff in those areas because of that extra material that it was using. And I said, nope, I'm going back to one that is completely smooth all the way around. And it worked really well. I'd have to replace them every 6 to 8 months as the TPU would finally start to break. And it wouldn't hold air inside of it anymore. So the value of it was pretty much lost. But yeah, I learned a lot of those things the hard way with TPU.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is it has to be thick enough to actually measure it, because let's say that you print just a really thin sheet of TPU and then you press that needle onto a table. You're measuring a little bit of the TPU, but you're also measuring the hardness of the table underneath it at that point. So you have to have a thick enough sample that it can like deform without actually measuring whatever the surface is that's underneath it. So you have to keep that in mind as well. They usually say like a 1 inch by 1 inch section, like 1 inch thick, is a pretty safe measurement depending on whatever material you're using. But yeah, now for anyone that wants to go and double check things, because like, once again, I can say most of the Amazon stuff seems to have like copy pasted descriptions. They're like, oh, if I write 95A on here, then it sells. So like we ended up getting a ton of different brands, and you measure them and they are all over the place. They tend to be harder than what they say. They tend not to be softer, just because the softer the material, the harder it is to manufacture, and no one's going to add that extra pain during the manufacturing process and not at least get the credit that they deserve by listing it. And they're like, man, if we're going to make 85A, we're not just going to call it 95A, because we're going to go through all the pain and suffering of doing a really flexible plastic. We're going to get the credit that we deserve for it online.
Amen to that. That's it is currently my bane. TPU, hilariously the same thing of, we have clients requesting a specific durometer of TPU, and I'm telling them I can't guarantee that. There's no manufacturer out there that will give me those numbers that I can trust. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, because, we found all these that claim this. I said, but claim an actuality. If you want to specify the brand and material that we use, I will happily buy whomever that you would like. However, if I am going to be the one that certifies the quality of the product, we're going to be playing a different game here.
Yeah, Ninja Flex is very good at being exactly what they claim to be. I think they were the only brand. Yep.
You pay for it, but yes, they're one of the best. And normally when we have a client that specifies a durometer, I said find the one that you want from Ninja Tech, and I'll buy it because
Yep.
I do not stock their material. It's way too expensive for us to have in inventory unless it is left over from a previous product.
Yep. That's what I go to if I need a very specific hardness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should be making it, but I never make enough of it. That's the only other thing that's annoying is like whenever I make something, I basically have to commit to about 1,000 spools. That's about the minimum order that I can get of like the resin pellets.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, people get real mad at me if I only order one Gaylord of it, basically a 1 ton roughly.
Yep.
Because whenever you're asking for pricing, they say, what's your yearly consumption? And you don't want to be like, oh, well, I plan on placing one order ever. That's it. So that's not a very good way to get good pricing. But other than that, if it was easier than that, I'd be getting a little bit of everything and just trying it out and just seeing what happens. Sometimes I can get smaller quantities of it, which is what I did for like PHA. So PHA, we just ran a 25 or 30 kilogram batch, I think. So it was a pretty small batch. Now I've got 50 more kilograms on the way, and then probably 1,000 after that. So it's a good way to scale up when a company is willing to send you a smaller amount to kind of get started with, especially because most things just don't work. Like you try it and you're like, oh, all right, we did the first 2 or 3 spools. I'm not doing that again. We did that with fillers, and I see Catlet 1984 is in the chat right now. He's got Chris. One of those spools. Yeah. So we basically wanted to experiment. We're like, how much filler can we put into a plastic before it just doesn't print anymore?
Yep.
So I didn't know what that number was. I know you can put a lot in it. I've heard a lot of rumors and trade secrets. This is one of those things that very, very few people will actually share the information on, because the more filler that you can add into a plastic, the cheaper it is to manufacture. But if you add too much, then you start to have problems. So if you kind of learn what a company kind of found as their sweet spot, that means that they've sunk a ton of time and money into kind of playing with that needle, going back and forth. They're like, add a little bit more, add a little bit less, until it kind of like works out naturally. So of course you're not going to share that information, then have people jump to it. But I'm going to tell you what we ended up finding out, because I think it's still fun. I had heard that you could put sometimes 40% filler. A filler is a powder usually. I mean, it can be a powder, it can be a liquid, it can be a wax, it can be all sorts of things. But
I know what it often is. Can I say what it often is?
You know the top 2?
I know one of them.
All right, what's the first one?
Talc.
Yep, talc is the first one.
Yeah.
Calcium carbonate is the second one. They're just really common in the plastics industry.
But there's one particular problem with talc that most people don't think about.
There is one thing that I'm still investigating, and I don't want to talk about that one yet until I have definitive answers on it.
I know what it is too, because it's the same problem that I have with it. Yeah. But yeah, all right, we will move past that one. Calcium carbonate, isn't that baking soda?
Calcium carbonate is limestone, and that's what you get around like your sink or whatever, that like white crusty stuff. If you ever have just like lime scale and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's basically a pretty inert, non-reactive substance. It is actually decent at conducting heat, which is something that plastics usually suffer from. So as you add more of it in there, the fact that it conducts heat kind of like offsets the issue of it. You're kind of like diluting your plastic, so Tums. It kind of hides it.
That's I'm like I know calcium carbonate is used in a very common product. It's Tums.
Yep.
Tums is basically calcium carbonate with a bit of flavor.
Yep. So yeah, I wanted to figure out, because like there's these, you can actually add a little bit. So for full disclosure, the filament that we make has nothing added to it. So it's 100% pure PLA. I did that just because the automotive industry was like, hey, whatever it is has to be fully disclosed. We needed to use something that's tried and tested and stuff. So that's where that came from. That being said, you can actually add a little bit of filler. Like by little bit, I mean anywhere between like 2 and 5%. And you can actually get a little bit better results. So like I said, calcium carbonate can help change the melt of something. It can make something more thermally conductive. So adding a little bit is helpful, but at some point you're going to add so much of it in that it's going to start to hurt the product. So you're going to kind of like switch from making it better to making it worse. And then my goal is to figure out how bad can you make it before it actually doesn't print anymore.
And that's why you made the filament that you coined.
Yeah, the PLA minus is what I'm trying to go for
instead of PLA plus.
Yep.
Great name.
I eventually want to launch a PLA minus. I'm going to call it PLA minus because I'm an engineer, and I think that it's like not very trustworthy to
No.
call your normal stuff. Like people add a lot of fillers into something and then they launch it and call it PLA, and then they call their PLA plus. It's really just PLA without the fillers. And I'm like,
Yep.
that sounds
It's
back.
disingenuous, and quite frankly, I think it's lying. Because
Yep.
you and like all these companies that are selling the rapid filament, you're putting fillers in it. This is so, if people haven't figured it out, last week's episode was an intro to this week's episode and next week's episode. Next week is resin. It's like I planned this a long time ago. But like, and I don't know if I want to say the specific company, but a specific company called me out, kind of. And they're like, hey, we don't provide recipes. I'm like, well, okay, but if you don't provide recipes, or at least tell me what's in the filament, I can't certify it to my clients. And we have clients that require not only certificate of conformities, like CFCs, but they also require material certifications. And if all I can do is say, well, this company says it's PLA, and they find it's not PLA, my God, the amount of legal liability I've just opened myself up to is insane. And some companies don't see a problem in this. I do. Because, yes, some of those companies don't, their primary business model is not selling to businesses, it's selling to consumers. But it doesn't mean that you should still sell something to a consumer that has an additive in it and not be clear and upfront that it has an additive. So, like, I'm going to call out Elegoo because I do not like their rapid PETG. I've finally gotten through the last of it that I have. It is a PETG that melts incredibly low. It does print faster, but it expands like crazy, especially in barrels. So you can't leave it loaded into the printer or it will clog as you, later on when you try to remove it. I don't know what the filler is. I have no clue what that filler is. It is something, and whatever that filler is does not like methylene chloride, which is the key component in 3D gloop. It does not melt or get damaged by methylene chloride, which now also means that bonding those parts together is pretty much impossible. And it's like selling it as PETG is disingenuous because it's not PETG. It is a copolyester of some sort that companies are refusing to give at least some idea. I don't need to know your percentages, but I need to know what's in there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
PETG is a little
rant
bit
over.
different than PLA. So PLA has a lot more like filler based things.
Yeah.
PETG, I have probably 30 different types of PETGs that melt at completely different temperatures on my shelf. Ones that are below 200 Celsius for
Yep.
melting, and I've got ones that are as high as like 290, and they are all PETG, untouched, unaltered. They're just from different manufacturers that have different approaches on how they're building it.
Well, it's the
Um,
blend, right? The to get the PET, you can blend different stuff to get there, different percentages to still get to PET. And then the glycol that you're adding to get the G, you can add a small amount of glycol, you can add a ton of glycol. So my assumption is that's where it's at, but I'm not 100% sure as to how that would occur. So that material science is not my
Yeah,
specialty.
PETG is way more like, or I should say PET in general is a way more mature plastic compared to
Yes.
PLA because like it's everywhere.
Yep.
Like if you go to a random like distributor that resells plastic resin pellets, everyone's carries PET of some sort. Whereas PLA, you are limited to like one place in the US that you can get it and one place in overseas, I guess, or two places, I guess, overseas. So like it is very, very
Yep.
narrow. And the three big manufacturers of PLA all are a little bit different. Two of them are like identical, and the last one is considerably different. But if there were like tens or 20s of companies or whatever that all made PLA, then you would have different shots at saying, hey, I use this one for my high speed stuff. I use this one for my budget. Um, but right now, PLA is just taking those shortcuts by fillers. But I don't see a whole lot of fillers per se in PET. It's usually just like sourcing completely different resins. Um, I could probably send you a bunch of the data sheets, honestly, if you want to like don't share the actual data sheets, but if you share the contents of what is in them, it could probably be like pretty interesting to kind of see how different they are from each other.
We'll talk off
PET is
stream,
one
but
of the
I'm
few
interested.
plastics that I can specifically ask for something with a specific melt flow. So I can say, hey, I want to have a melt flow of 10. So
Yeah.
um, that is pretty cool. That's the one of the very few plastics I actually get that say in.
I guess as this industry matures, right? It's maturing toward a consumer grade product where consumers are like, I don't really give a damn what it's made out of as long as it works. But I think a lot of companies forget that there's also the business sector, which is like, we really don't care what color it is. We just need it to be pure, or we need to know that it's not pure. Joe Prussia, a few hours ago, released, their very in-depth study on their carbon fiber because of the Nathan Builds Robots video, which sparked quite a bit of controversy and has done incredibly well. That is a video that is like 3x his channel size. So that is a very, very good video as far as videos go. But where he showed that whatever carbon fiber filament that he was looking at, if you rubbed your hand against it, you would get carbon fiber stuck into your skin. And I'm like, is this news to people? Did people not know that this is how that worked? But apparently that's not how it always works, because Prussia did it, and their Prussiament carbon fiber doesn't actually have that problem, or nowhere near as significantly as NBR showed in his video. So that is an interesting one to me, and I'll be curious to see other companies. But I said, this is the transparency that we need in this industry. I am particularly tired of manufacturers just saying, oh, this is carbon fiber. Well, is it long strand carbon fiber? Is it carbon fiber dust? Is it short strand carbon fiber? Give me numbers. Because let's be honest, carbon fiber filament is pretty much useless. It is the only time that I disagree with that is nylon. Carbon fiber nylon is amazing because it keeps the nylon from warping. That's like the one reason I love carbon fiber nylon. But otherwise, carbon fiber filament is weaker. It is less flexible, but it is also weaker. It's not like you're building a Bugatti or something with a 3D printer. It's not woven carbon fiber. You're not getting the value out of it. So yeah, it is quite complicated when you look at the small business side of things versus the non-small business, right?
Yep. I see one person asking why polycarbonate is so expensive.
Yep.
I can absolutely lend some answers to that. A lot of the most expensive materials that we make are the ones that are the least popular. And that's because a lot of the stuff that we do that dictates our cost is going to be the one-time setup. So for example, a typical run, if you were to just start up and shut down all on the same day and run one thing, it typically involves a lot of drying. So what we do is we load up our hopper and we dry it for anywhere between like 4 and 8 hours for PLA. Sometimes it can be as much as like 16 or even 24 hours if something's really sensitive. Sometimes we have to use a special dryer just for it. So some materials just work with standard stuff, and some things need very specific hookups. So what it ends up coming down to is when we're running PLA, we can basically load up the hopper with PLA, and then we just start making PLA, and all of that setup time, that 4 to 8 hours, plus whatever cleaning we had to do to the machine to start it up, is just a one-time setup. And if we run for days, then we don't have to do that one-time setup thing again. But if we shut down and we want to switch materials, then we actually have to purge our machine, and basically shut it all down, clean it all out, vacuum everything out, make sure there's not a single pellet left in of anything else.
Yep.
Load up the new material, and basically start that whole process over. So if there's a popular material, we make a ton of it, which means that our setup is kind of spread across hundreds, if not thousands of spools. Whereas if we're making a one-off material, like when we made PHA, we made 50 or 30. So all of those hours of setup time have to kind of be factored into all those individual spools.
And that
Polycarb
amortization gets expensive.
Oh yeah, it gets really, really expensive.
Yep.
And in PHA's case, we actually have to rip apart our machine and do something special to it, which I can't say exactly what it is. But we actually have to kind of like retool the entire machine outside of just the screw. So that is something that only happens for PHA so far. That's something that's unique, and that's something that if we're running tons of it, we can do it once and run many batches. But if it's something that's not popular, then it basically has to get baked into the price. So
Yep.
You see that a lot with different materials. Literally, the more popular it becomes, the cheaper it's going to become, because it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy there.
It's economies of scale.
Yep. And then same thing goes for actually sourcing materials. So I
Yep.
can usually get things like many percentages cheaper. So like I can usually get like a plastic for a third of the price if I'm buying it in bulk compared to buying it in small quantities. Small quantities meaning like a couple tons at a time versus like hundreds of tons at a time. So all of those things kind of add up. That being said, if something's really expensive and it starts to grow popular, then we get to start scaling up. So that's kind of also fun.
Yep.
TPU
Yep.
is one of those things as well. So TPU is expensive when you're doing it in small batches. Same with ABS. ABS is way, way, way cheaper, all supplies considered, than PLA.
Yep.
But it sells more expensive just because it's way less popular. So that's one of those things that if enough people said, we like ABS and we're going to only print with ABS, then you would end up getting filament that's ABS that's way cheaper than PLA as everybody starts scaling up for it.
The one I want to see, I don't think anyone's made it yet, but a Triton filament.
A Triton filament?
Triton, right? Isn't that a very common industry plastic? Triton?
I'm not sure.
Am I
I'm not
wrong?
familiar with that.
I could be wrong. Oh, it's gonna bother me.
I mean, I don't know every type of plastic either. I'm more of
Tritan,
a,
T-A-N, Tritan. It's from Eastman.
oh
Um,
yeah, Eastman does everything.
yeah, no surprises there. I have some custom one-off filament from them here, that I cannot get to print and smells terrible because one of the key components of it is butylene. So when you print it, it off-gases butyric acid, which is not only the thing that makes all of your tools sticky. You ever had, like, you go into your toolbox and your tools are sticky? That's because there's butylene in it. But it also smells like vomit because it's what makes vomit smell like vomit. It's butyric acid. And so it means when you print it, it stinks and it sucks to print with. There's nothing fun about it to print with. Yeah. Bleh. Apparently Triton is what Nalgene bottles are made out of, according to Tarsman. And Andrew Rogers with the $10 says all your filament are belong to us. Or all our filament belong to us. Close enough. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Andrew Rogers. Mitch 3D says, can we print in Bakelite? I would love, honestly, that would be super cool because as someone that loves to refurbish old stuff in general, like I love older clocks. Um, Bakelite would be awesome, but we moved away from Bakelite for some pretty key reasons. Oh, it's counter. You're counting down.
Catching up. What was that?
There's a counter on your screen counting down.
On mine?
Yes.
Oh, that's still.
Your camera has a countdown timer. I was gonna say
I
I think
countdown until rainbow.
like there's a countdown. What happens at 0?
That's when we get rainbow territory. Yeah, I'm catching up on comments. I see Pezla's in there is telling me that I got to get on Twitter again. I know.
Yeah, I tagged at Polar Filament, but it doesn't seem as though that account is active.
No, like we have it reserved, but so I think I'll try to get some more, I don't know, interest in there because like I don't use Twitter personally.
I
So I
know.
am a consumer of like I watch a lot of YouTube, I watch a lot of TikTok. Now it's Instagram as well, and they all have different personalities and stuff. So there's kind of like different unsaid rules about what you do or what you don't do. People will watch YouTube and they'll listen to somebody ramble on for 20 minutes, but they won't listen to somebody ramble on for 2 full seconds on TikTok. Like if you don't have 2 full seconds of like I don't know, dopamine inducing content, then like that's it. You move on to the next one.
That's true.
So I don't know what Twitter is. Like, I mean, I know what it is, but I don't know how I'd use it effectively other than just maybe like responding to people and stuff like that. But I feel like I'd be a pretty bad content creator on there right now.
It's not even about creating content. To me, Twitter is more of an ability for us to get to the community of a lot of people, and it keeps us out of the cesspool of Facebook. Facebook is there's so many people on Facebook, especially in the Facebook groups, but they're often like just massively toxic. Twitter so far, there's certainly the corners of Twitter that are kind of rough, but Twitter is great because a lot of the larger creators, and even the smaller creators like myself, we are all on Twitter. And so when a company releases a new color or does a sale or whatever it is, we can see it, we can retweet it and all of that. And I like when companies are active there because it allows us to also better interact with them and see, I don't know, more about the company, like a behind the scenes or something like that, or new product launches, or you can do polls out there as well. So I don't know. I I'm not a huge fan of social media either, says the content creator. But Twitter and YouTube are the only two. Although I sometimes monitor the Instagram account, but like Twitter and YouTube are the only two accounts that I monitor for the company. Everything else is done by the staff.
I think I'm reading the comments here. I think I need to get our credentials. I don't even have the credentials for our Polar Filament account. I'd have to get those, but
yeah, have
I'll
fun.
probably start going on there. I'll at least I'll start probing and see what goes on and see if I can do something with that. Maybe this is the final thing. I think you got it, Pezlas. You've convinced me.
Oh, cause Greg is going to it.
Huh? Oh no, I didn't even see that.
Oh shit! Guess what?
Oh yeah,
Company name Greg is going. Yeah, I'm trying not to mention any competitors because it feels disingenuous, and it is also why we won't be doing any giveaways for our normal, filament sponsor.
I gotta do
this time.
Giveaway for us.
Liz is an influencer, but that I hate that word so much. I hate the word influencer. It sucks. I wish there was a better term that was just less cringy, but there isn't. Okay, so that's the Google form for people.
Yes, so I'm going to be moving up in value of gift cards here. So this first one is for $10. If anyone wants to fill out the form is just what's your username or email. I'll announce it based on the username, and I'll send you an email with the actual code. I'm going to do a 10, a 20, and then a $30 one.
Can it just be the same? Can it just be the same form and you just draw a few different names from it?
I can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
But right now the first one will be 10.
Okay. And we use, I don't know if you know, it's wheelofnames.com.
All right. I will get that.
It's literally like a Wheel of Fortune thing. You can put all the names in it from the Google form, and you can even shuffle them. And then when people win, you can remove them so that they don't win again. And that it simplifies the giveaway process. So yeah, if you do want to win some gift cards potentially to Polar Filament, click the pinned chat link up there. It is a Google form. Fill it out. Get yourself some gift cards so that you can get some awesome made in America, man. You guys are doing it in Troy, Michigan. I have enjoyed your materials. I have not enjoyed how USPS absolutely destroyed the box that was sent to me and left it in the rain. But that is not your fault. I am excited. And like, for those that don't know, this is what one of the things I love about you guys is that you post your tests. This red silk, this is not an official color. This color is likely to never be made again because you made it and you're like, I wish it was shinier. All right, let me just put all these up. And if you're in the Discord server, there are coupon codes in the Discord server.
Oh yeah, we're often that shiny silk is really cheap. I think it's like 60% off or something like that because I just want to get rid of it. I don't like it.
it's a lot of money off on the filament, and it's like, look, if you just want to play around or you want like a one-of-a-kind spool that you'll never get again, that is awesome. And I know further up, it had been asked, I think it was by John O, if you're going to be doing a filament subscription, because I love those. So we have one with a competitor also made in America, and it's 2 kilos delivered to my door. One is always something different. So they literally just go into the colorant, just grab a bunch, figure it out, dump it in and send it and see what happens. And then there's one off-the-shelf color. I assume the off-the-shelf color is, what do we have the most stock of that we need to get rid of, put it in the box and send it? Because, like, from a business perspective, that's the right way to do it, right? You pull out of the stock. But it was like, it's less than $40 delivered to my door. And I'm like, that's a great value for those that want some custom stuff, that want to support a company, and that want to get a couple of rolls every month. One is one of a kind, never to be made again, and the other is just one off of the stock. Dark Third Dimension is asking if the contest is US only. I guess technically it's
no,
not.
That's why I'm doing a gift card, because a gift card will kind of scale appropriately. So that being said, if you are, so I mean, go ahead if you want to jump in, but like, I know that if you're in Canada, it just costs a lot more to ship. If you're like overseas, if you are not in North America, it costs more to ship than you'll spend in the filament itself. So I'd recommend against it. But once again, $10 off is $10 off. However you want to do that, we would just be extremely expensive if you don't live in the U.S. to actually buy our filament. But yeah, I got a good number of responses here. I'm fine to spin up. If you guys want to jump in, I'll give you like another minute to submit if you want to. And then I will copy these names and we'll go to the Wheel of Fortune or whatever it's called. What was the website again? It was
Wheelofnames.com.
Wheel of Names.
It appears that you are pushing your desktop audio through as well. Mute that tab because it has terrible music.
I'll just change my
3D Print Junkies asking if you ship to Mexico. Look, this is a small business, man. They'll ship anywhere you want as long as you pay for it. Okay. Like, shipping to Mexico is no big deal, is it?
It's once again more expensive, but not prohibitively expensive. So like Canada and Mexico are expensive, but not like horrible. Yeah. But like we shipped stuff to like Egypt and it was like $200 or something like that. To ship. So
that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's not really worth it for that. All right, let's see if I can do what's desktop plus full. Whoa.
Hi, me. You don't have to show it. Just if you want to show it, you can.
Here we go. All right. Let me get the names. All right, we got 34 people in here. I'm going to paste those in.
Shawnee Boy's asking a question that we can't answer, but I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna tell him that we can't answer it. It says, which companies do you make filament for? I've heard of American companies respooling Chinese filament and calling them American made. Is that true? So the first part of your question, not gonna happen. There's not a chance.
No, I won't be able to.
Yeah,
I signed stuff to say I won't share that.
Yeah, I don't even have to ask you that. I know you can't share that. And the second part of the question is that he's heard of American companies respooling Chinese film and calling them made in America. Is that true? I can confirm that is true for a couple of brands, and I am not happy about that.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, GST was very famously, doing this. Yeah. So they would buy a 50-kilo roll out of China. They'd bring it in and they'd respool it onto 1-kilo rolls and sell it as made in America. And I don't think that qualifies. Nobody's ever technically called them on it. But they had a whole thing where someone from their social media department was posting videos onto TikTok and a couple of other platforms of what we believe to be a C-suite executive in his underwear rolling the filament on a respooler. I'm like, okay, sure. I guess that's a thing. And that's where it was kind of obvious what was going on. I'm like, oh, well, that's not made in America now, is it? So
yeah, I get a lot of rumors from my end. It's very hard to confirm because no one wants to actually share it. I usually have a little bit more info than like the general public does because I get to hear from the actual people doing it. But once again, I still have rumors and what I know. So I always try to like avoid saying anything that I found out about other people. I also know like other things, they do it like once or twice or something to experiment and then it kind of takes over. So the things that I know are the ones that are everything that I know officially. I usually sign something saying I can't share it. And the stuff that I know unofficially is usually like 90% sure, 10% speculation. So I don't want to risk it for the speculation and get something wrong.
I heard it.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
I'm going to spin this. Let's see who gets the first one here.
And if you're chosen, you gotta comment in there. Is it John Olson?
John Olson. All
and
right.
I can see him. I can literally see him in the chat. So, awesome. Well, congratulations.
I will send this out as soon as the video is done. Sending a message to you right now. So I've got that. Got to pull emails, but that is good for now. All right. And then I will do
Infinite Us again. Yeah, I used to share my screen for that, and I'm like, nah, there's just too much of ways that goes wrong, and I accidentally share like people's emails. And I'll just tell them who won. It was easier. But yes, congratulations, John Olson. We will do some giveaways we'll do a couple more in a little bit. I want to talk about the Grillamint. you guys did something that I don't think I've ever seen another filament company do. You opened your doors to people to come over, hang out, and make their own freaking filament. Well, I guess no, there is one other company that does this, but I don't know if they feed you at the same time. Am I allowed to say the name of the company that does
Oh
it?
yeah, I don't care. I mean,
Okay.
that was the influence for this.
Okay,
I
it
think
was
they stopped doing it, and then somebody's like, "Man, I wish somebody would do that." And I was like, "Huh, we're somebody."
they just restarted. Protopasta is the other one that does it. Where you can pay, it's like $100, I think, and it gets you your own custom spool. Don't quote me on that number, but yeah, Protopasta does it. You of course have to be local to them. They're up in Oregon, so you have to be local to them. But yeah, so you guys did this Polar Grillement, which, by the way, great name, and you made a seafoam color, which I have fallen in love with. And stupidly, I didn't pick it up in my last order from you guys, but I have fallen in love with that color. It is so pretty. Let's talk about this, because that's a whole thing.
Yeah, those I didn't know how that was going to work. This was the first time doing this, and I was like, all right, we can make a custom spool. So, from what I've seen, is depending on your machinery, you can usually make one or two spools of a color, and that's possible. Our
Mhm.
machine is built at pumping out a lot of plastic, so it's really hard to do multiple colors. So I can't really say, hey, every person gets to make their own custom spool. So that means we kind of had to have like a group consensus.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from this time. It was basically the loudest person won for this one because we had a lot of people in the room that were kind of like throwing out ideas. I vetoed a few ideas just because they're things that I've tried that I knew would not turn out as well as people wanted to. So Seafoam was an example of one that sounded good, like the mixture of existing colors that we had is how we made that. And it just sounded like it had some promise into it. It was two
Yep.
colors that should theoretically mix fine. So you never really get to know what it looks like. That being said, one of the hardest parts, I don't like the name Seafoam. I love the color itself.
Mm.
But one of the challenges is that when we enter a spool into our database, basically our filament line spits out a label as soon as every spool finishes. So I need to know ahead of time what that label is going to say. So we enter it into our database before I've actually seen the spool. So a lot of times our spool names start out really generic, like that red silk that you have.
Yep.
It's way pinker than it is red. But the reason that it's called red silk is because we mixed red PLA with TPU is how you get the silkiness of it. Turns out the silkiness really lightens up the color. So you end up with something that's like pink. So if I got to rename it right now, I might call it like a dark pink or a light red silk instead of just what that is. And then usually we go back and rename them something that sounds a lot more specific.
Right.
So like what shade of red is that? What's something else that's that shade of red? Now I'll give it a much better name. It's like Magic Color. We didn't know what that was going to look like. So we just called it Magic Color for color changing blue. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if it was going to be a solid blue or if it was going to be a light blue. So gave it that generic name. We'll fix it on the next run. Um,
Rose Kindred is asking, they see shiny on the seafoam. Does it require a hardened nozzle? There's glitter in
no,
it.
yes. So there's a million different ways to do shinies. Um, I took an approach that is probably more work than I needed to do. But basically you can add like mylar into it, which is what like balloons are made out of it, like the dollar store. They're that like shiny metallic thing. You can do mica, which is kind of like it's a mineral or a rock that tends to be really shiny. You can add things like metal particulates in there, which are going to be extremely shiny. You can add glass beads into it, which will be extremely shiny. But
And
each one of them
destroy
have
hot ends.
pros and cons. Yeah. So we ended up going with mica. Mica pretty much is unfazed for your nozzle. The
Yep.
downside to it, it won't like destroy your nozzle. But if two chunks of mica get in at the same time, it can clog
It
your
can
nozzle.
clog it.
So
Yep.
the downsides to mica is that in order to get something that works good, is you have to use a much smaller speckle than you would with anything else. So like mylar, you can use a much larger one. So like if you ever see those um, like uh, like marbles or sparklies or confetti or anything like that. And if they got really big, noticeable sparkles, then that's usually something like that. So ours are much smaller. Um, but yeah, that won't do anything to damage your nozzle or anything. It has the potential to jam, but once again, we use ones that are small enough that two of them can go through without jamming, which I made that mistake a long time ago when I got to choose the particulate size. I was like, all right, everyone's using a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. So our particulate just needs to be smaller than 0.4 and I'm good. So I use 0.3.
Oh no.
Um, but I didn't realize like throwing two basketballs into a net, any one basketball will go right through the net, no problem every single time. But if two go in at the same time, then you're going to jam the net.
Is it a
So
basketball net large enough to fit two basketballs perfectly?
I don't know. I don't think so. I've gotten two basketballs stuck in a basketball net. Not that I'm using an official one, but
I always
same.
thought that you
That's my
could.
analogy.
But
So
yes, no, I've been there, had that happen. The really high glitter filaments often will have that problem. Um, and Zerno makes fun of me. He says apparently if you're a big special influencer person, you can do it at printed solid too. To be clear, I was going to pay for a custom color with them, and the plan was to make that custom color on camera. But at the last minute, Dave was like, "Hey, you want to make elixir instead?" The answer is always yes. Do you want to make a color that will never ever exist, possibly ever again, because this is the last of the polyalchemy elixir silver colorant? The answer is yes. Of course, that's what you wanted to do. So I was already going to do it, but we were going to make our own custom 3D Musketeers colors. That was always the plan, and there was a significant cost for that, but from a business standpoint, if I can brand all of my stuff with the same color and someone says, oh, I don't really care what color it is, there's value there. Because we have a lot of clients that don't care about that. Then there are ones that really care about color. And that has been
oh yeah.
we looked at producing our own filament and just it never made business sense for us. We started out really early on back in the day. Mitch, you're gonna cringe a little bit at this, but we were producing filament on a Filostruder 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because back in the day, now I'm talking like what 2014 to 2016, it was significantly more affordable to do it that way. And yes, diameter was terrible. Ovality was terrible. There was dust and hair and random BS that made it into the filament. And the color, we didn't know what we were doing. Everything about that was bad, but you know what? It worked. And it was what we could use at the time because it was $60 to $80 a kilogram for crappy material back then. Now, of course, you guys are selling it sub $20 a kilo, right?
Yep. So we have
For the
some that
most
are
stuff.
$18.99, some $21.99.
Yeah. And so you're selling it affordably, made in America, right? And you're selling it for less than some of the companies that are importing it, which is still funny to me. Like, why would people choose, unless you need a specific color, obviously, that these other manufacturers don't have, but why would you not choose to support local labor and spend less money? Like, there's no reason not to do this. But as a small business, I can see a lot of our business going away to companies out of China that are, doing service-based 3D printing for pennies on the dollar comparatively, because they're also manufacturing their own filament with pennies on the dollar labor comparatively. And it's like, yep, okay, well, fine.
Actually,
we're going to shift to
that
be different.
reminds me. I want to do a little bit of a kind of a R&D plug. This is something that's moving into the next phase of stuff. If anyone here runs a print farm and wants a way to basically get files from people without saying, hey, if you want me to quote this, send me an email and then I'll quote it when I get a chance. We have an automated quote tool that we're going to open up to the public. So if you go to, I'll drop the URL or whatever, it's print.polarfilament.com. Polarfilament.
Oh, that's right. We talked about this and I can't use it.
Yeah, so
I'm still bummed about that.
This is basically a spot where you can drag and drop. It's nothing new per se.
Yeah.
It's just that usually as like a normal person, you don't get the opportunity to actually have your own. It's something that big companies have. So we developed it for ourselves. It made our lives a lot easier, and we tend to try to like release those tools and like make them available to the public. So this is in beta right now. I think we've got like 15 companies using it right now. So just a few, and they're all relatively small. And we're just trying to kind of get feedback. I wonder, I should have set up a sandbox because I can't show our actual orders or anything like that. But basically, it's twofold. One is to allow people to submit a file a lot easier. You drag and drop it, you see the preview, and then it lets you tinker around with like the quoting process. We've got like 5 or 6 different pricing algorithms on it. Some people charge by weight, some people charge by time, some people charge by all sorts of different things, like one-time setup and tooling
Yep.
fees and stuff like that. So that's kind of the stuff that we're doing in the beta, is figuring out like, how do people come up with their pricing? If I give you a file, how did you come up with that number that you wanted us to use? So we've got like the different pricing schemes, and then you can also fine tune them, different materials, different colors, and stuff like that. So that way you can kind of fill everything out. Automated emails are the big thing. So that
Oh,
was my biggest complaint, is that I
that's
hate
nice.
when every morning I wake up and it's just like my email was full of people saying, "Hey, what's the status of my project? Hey, what's the status of my project? Hey, what's the status of my project?" I'd be like, "All right, yours is 5 out of 7 parts complete. Yours is 300 out of 900 parts complete. Yours hasn't been started yet. Um, this one is, we're waiting on information from you." So the automated emails kind of like follow it through the process, kind of like an Amazon order. Like when
Yep.
you submit the Amazon order and then you get a notification like your order has shipped, stuff like that, or if there's a problem.
So
There's also tracking.
this isn't just a custom quoting thing. You're building a full CRM.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's
that's pretty awesome.
basically all of the complaints that we had about running a print farm, trying to do a software that does it. And I'm sure other people out there have it, is all. So, but then also from our side, everything has the file management is all handled. One other complaint that I have is that people never use the same file names, or they'll submit the same file name with the same part, but it's a different model or something.
Yep.
So we give everything a number, which is not, once again.
Base.stl. How many of
Yep.
those I have?
Yep. Exactly. Or base
Yep.
final.stl.
Final V2 was
So
always my favorite.
yep. So everything gets turned into a number, as well as keeping the original file name, so you can have
Yep.
that as a reference. So it'll be like, hey, this is part ABC 1 2 3 4 or something like that. And then if they submit it again, it'll be ABC 1 2 3 5 and stuff.
You know what?
And then
I bet we could implement it here. Because I would just have to have, so the reason that we chose not to use it is because it's not locally driven. It's driven, via a cloud, and for some of our customers that's a problem. Well, if I just put a disclaimer in the front that says, "Hey, by agreeing to use this platform, if you're under an NDA, just don't use this platform, please." It's probably safe, but none of us can guarantee that. So just here, enjoy. And see, this is the weird thing, like as a consumer, that I know consumers do. They'll find everyone that uses it, and then they'll just put the same part to everyone and see who's the cheapest and just order it from them. We had a client that came to us for a part, and he's like, and I gave him a quote. It was like $350. He said, "I can get it from Craft Cloud for $50." And I said, he's like, "Can you do anything on the price?" I said, "No. And actually, I recommend that you take that deal." "Oh, well, theirs is going to be 4 to 6 weeks." I said, "Well, see, there's your problem. If you want something done faster, you need to pay more money for it." "Well, when do you need it by?" "I need it by Friday." And this was like Tuesday. I'm like, "I'm happy to do that for you, but this is our price, right? And he's like, "Well, Craft Cloud says it's 500 if I want it by Friday." I said, "So I am beating Craft Cloud's prices. I'm just not beating the one that is clearly making their own filament or doesn't care about profit margins, because it was a 900-gram part, so almost $20 cost. If you're selling a almost $20 cost part for $50, you're not making money. Like there's so much labor involved in that, you will not make good money on that." And yeah, he ended up waiting the time. I said, "If you ever change your mind, let me know." But I don't blame you. $50, I'd do the same damn thing. I said, shit, there's products that I could send to them and make more money on. But yeah, that is of course always the problem of people being able to price shop. It means we have a much more laborious process, but it means it's very difficult for them to price shop. So I don't know. Part of me says it matters. The other part of me says it's not that big of a deal. I'd be curious, but there's just, I guess if they abandoned the order, you kind of figure they price shopped and you didn't win it. But it would be nice. Does your system have like an abandoned order email system?
Yes. So we
Oh
call them
shit!
the freshness report,
Nice.
because there's 2 numbers that matter. One is how long since the order is submitted, and second one is how long has it been since you've interacted with it. So basically we have for ours, we guarantee a 24-hour interaction period, which means that every 24 hours there will be some sort of status update, whether or not that means like sometimes it's a message saying I can't run this until tomorrow or something like that. But most of the time it will be like, hey, we're done with 5 out of 20 of your parts, and then we're done with 7 out of 20 of your parts. So that way we can make sure that like 24 hours hasn't gone by without updating somebody. So that way I don't have to get an email where somebody's like, I haven't seen an update on this for a day. Is everything still good? So those are the two numbers. Definitely for abandoned orders, we have when the way that we handle this is because like, as everyone knows, it is not 100% perfect to have an automatic quoted number. 90% of the time it's right, but every once in a while somebody will upload a file that is in like inch format when it should be millimeters, or vice versa. So it'll be like microscopic, and it will say, hey, this is going to use 0.0001 grams of filament. I'm like, okay, I can't even shave off a fraction of a piece of plastic that's that small or something. So those are the ones that's why I don't take like an automated payment on there, because then it would be 1 cent or something like that. And I'm like, all right, that's not happening. So that's where the human review comes in. So the process is you submit a part, a human reviews it, and then when the human reviewer kicks it over, then it sends you an automated payment link, and it says, hey, a human reviewed this. 90% of the time it's, yeah, we agree with the price. Every once in a while we say, hey, you need to 100x the model size because it's way too small, or you need to 1/100. I've had that where people will submit parts that are like the size of a car. It will say that it's like $1,000 or something like that, and they're like, yep, I'll submit that. And I'm like, do you really want to pay $1,000 for this? And I'll send them an email back. I'm like, hey, I got good news. Your part is actually going to cost you $20 and not $1,000 because you submitted it way too big. So little things like that. But yeah, then following it through that whole process, we've got the different stages. So you've submitted a file, it's approved, it's in slicing, it's printing, and then it's out for delivery / pickup. So it like tracks it all the way through. Emails go out all the way. So now it's pretty hands off. The guy that like runs the print farm, I don't have to like go do daily status updates with him and say, hey, we got this big project. Is it on track? The next things that I'm working on for it is like more of the business facing side, because sometimes people are like, it's cool that you can pay by credit card. However, my company only works with purchase orders and quotes. So right now we manually create those quotes because it's so rare. It's not super common. So we'll just kind of like copy paste everything in, send the quote manually. But now I'm working on one that will generate that quote. So if we hit a button, it'll just generate the PDF, send that out with that same information. So it's really, this whole tool has just been, what do we sink our time into, and can we automate as much of that as possible?
All right, I think I'm gonna I think I need in on this because there's your 30 minutes.
Oh.
Uh, I I think I want in on this because I think that I can use just a generic disclaimer and say, hey, don't upload anything to this that is protected, secretive, export controlled, that kind of stuff. Because
that's what we have already in the default terms and conditions is like, 1, do you have permission to upload and print the model that you're asking us to do?
Read that.
Yeah.
You know they don't.
And then 2 is that we don't share any files. So it's more just like letting people know, like, hey, if you're worried about it being shared, here is our counter agreement that we are not going to take your file that you uploaded and use it in a commercial or something like that. So like we do keep that all secretive and stuff. So because most people don't want their stuff out there. It's like stuff that I don't care about because I have no interest in jumping into the model business, but I know that everyone wants the reassurance that you're not going to do that, like in writing. So
it is very common. Like, we get a lot of inventors through our business. That is actually one of the core competencies, for better or worse, that we do, is work with inventors, because it's often a very long process and quite costly often as well. And we find that a lot of them want NDAs before we talk to them. I'm like, no, I will not sign a non-disclosure before we have our first talk. Because signing a non-disclosure for you and then you talk to me about what you do might be violating one for somebody else. And now I violated 2 NDAs, and now we have a huge problem. And they're like, I don't know if I can trust you. I said, I understand that you're paranoid as hell, and that's fine. You can be the Dale Gribble in this scenario. That's fine. But if I just stole people's ideas, why would I still be talking to people? I would have stolen the good ideas that came through our shop, made millions doing it, and then go bought a private island and never speak to anybody again, right? Like, it's so frustrating sometimes. But yeah, NDAs are one of those fun problems for businesses where it is a necessary evil in a lot of cases. And in larger scale cases, these NDAs have long, like 7 to 10 years. We've had some where it's like, all right, I'm just going to delete the files when we're done because there's just no valid use in us being able to talk about this in 10 years. It won't matter. Right.
Yep.
But then there are some fun times like where Adam Savage blew an NDA for us, which was cool with the Smithsonian. We had an NDA for some work we did with the Smithsonian. Adam Savage was the one that violated the NDA. I'm like, all right, I can talk about it now. That's awesome. Yeah, so there are times where NDAs can have quick ends that benefit companies. So that is a super cool system. What's the plan for that on release? Because you're gonna want to monetize that. What is your plan on monetization? If you want to
I haven't
speak to it.
figured out too much on that. Because right now I'm just doing it for free until it works, because I don't want to do anything else out of that.
Right.
We were thinking about 3 different options on, like, we might do a combo of the 3, we might do of one of each. One is like ad supported. So like obviously it costs money to run on our server. I know somebody else asked about like running a local instance. That's not going to happen, only because the parent company Douglas Innovation has done something like that before, where we made an exception for a company and we're like, okay, we'll let you run a local instance on this. And the next thing we know, we saw our source code floating around on an open GitHub repo, and people took it. So that is going to get vetoed instantly. And it took one instance to ruin it for everybody.
That sucks, dude.
So that is why we're not going to do anything local. But anyway, for like pricing and stuff like that, we're thinking about 2 really common things, right? Actually 3 really common things for what people do for models. 1, people sell stuff on Etsy. 2, people sell stuff on Shopify, and 3, people sell stuff on Patreon with subscriptions.
Yep.
So basically we're looking at how they do their pricing models, and then basically just knocking off a percentage of that. So like Etsy takes a cut of sales, for example.
Yep.
So there could be an option for the people that want to do that route. We'll just take a smaller cut than Etsy does, because it doesn't cost us as much to run something as Etsy probably does. That one's good for anybody that wants to kind of like get started and like post a bunch, like basically open up a site without the risk of paying money if it doesn't work out. So it's kind of like your trial. And it's like, hey, if you got an order, cool, you can pay. If you don't have any orders this month, it didn't cost you anything at all to have it up there. Some people are doing bigger volume. They don't want a percentage of sales because that adds up real quick. So that will be like, hey, pay me X dollars per month, like somewhere between like 10 and $50 a month or something. So if it makes sense to spend 10 to $50 a month for that because it's cheaper than doing a percentage, then you're fine.
Could you just cap the percentage? Say, hey, we're going to take 10% or 5%, whatever it is, but we're going to have a top cap we have no bottom cap, right? You do no sales, you pay nothing, but we have a top cap of $100. So if you're doing 40,000 parts a month at $200 a pop, you're only going to pay us this much. That's
still to be determined. And that's kind of where this beta stage is coming in. So
I love
when I introduce people, I have that like disclosure. I'm like, hey, we will be charging for this in some way eventually. Here's what I'm expecting it to be. Because I really don't want to say, hey, you want to try this thing? It's like free right now, and it's a secret that how much it's going to cost in the future. So like I definitely have more aggressive things on there right now. And I say like, hey, it will for sure be cheaper than this, but get that in your head. Like I don't want you to use this, and then eventually we start charging for it and you go, whoa, that's more than I was expecting. That being said, once again, this is not what we do as a company. So it's not like what we're trying to make money off of. Same with like filament side of things. Like, hey, we made it for ourselves. We did the R&D because it made sense for us. And now I'm just opening it up to everybody else. So same with filament. Hey, we made it for ourselves. Do you want to buy filament? You can if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. So same thing with this.
I love that idea. And you're looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint as well. My brother said, no, if someone wants to give a percentage and that adds up to 100,000 or something nuts, let them, right? And that's the pure capitalist would do that. I'm like, no, Mitch was talking about a cap first. I just made it an easier way to include a cap. The pure capitalist would say, I'm going to charge you a percentage. Screw you if you don't, if you use it too much, you're still getting the value out of it. And I would say, yeah, you're still going to get the value out of it. But at some point, eventually, if you are getting $100,000 a month through a print farm, through automated quoting like that, it's probably pretty close to time for you to develop your own, right? Because then you don't have to pay the fees. But I like your approach to this because you're looking at it and saying, all right, I want to help not the 3D hubs competitor, right? I want to help the small business that's got like maybe a dozen printers, maybe a few dozen printers, help them scale in a meaningful way without hurting them in the process, provide value, charge for that value. I don't know if you do it already, but something that I liked at 3D Hubs did, of course, they're no longer around. They were bought by Proto Labs, but 3D Hubs allowed you to either include it in your price. You could be public about the fee that was being charged. So this is the platform fee, but it's already included into your price. Or three, say, this is what my price is, and then you add the platform fee on top of it so that I know that I'm always going to get the amount of money that I need for the project. The client pays a little bit more for that fee. Some people might say, I'll eat the platform fee. I don't care. Some will say, nope, client's got to eat that. Make them actually eat it. So yeah, that is a great. I've avoided doing this for a while, Mitch, and now I'm pissed at you because you're gonna make me mess with my website again.
Yeah, it is in the process, or in the, like, I should say it's on the medium scale list of things to solve, is file hosting, where
Yeah.
those files actually live, because we do have like we have some government companies that are like extremely particular about this, and they're like, we love that, we hate our internal stuff. It's, once again, this was made because a 3D print should not take a week to do.
Nope.
A 3D print should be an overnight situation, and anything that adds up to that, like an email, like if you email somebody and it's the end of the day and they don't respond to it until the morning, like all of that just ruins the whole point of 3D
Yep.
printing.
I
But anyway, they want their stuff to live on their server, so we're trying to find a way to like host our source code of like the magic and the quoting tool and the order stuff like that on ours, but the files themselves live on a different server, so it kind of like splits off whenever an order is submitted.
Could you just host your entire thing on GovCloud? That would keep them from being pissed.
Potentially, I haven't looked into that before.
Or offer a GovCloud solution. So yeah, for
Yeah.
those that don't know, welcome to the world of ITAR and export controlled products, where if they go out onto the World Wide Web, you go to federal prison for 10 years, and it's a minimum $250,000 per incident fine. It's why I'm not going to connect my Bamboo to a network. I'm not stupid. Further, you can use cloud servers, but they must be approved, and they're normally hosted in what is called GovCloud. GovCloud is terrible. It is slow. It is nothing like an AWS setup. It is super slow. But if that's your only option, that's your only option. Yeah, I would. If I could like if I'm gonna input into your auto quoting tool the volume of a product, then I might as well just auto quote them themselves. Yeah, you would have to host it. Huh? How would you do this?
That's something that I haven't found like the official way, but like we do have a lot of demand for that, and when there's demand, it creates the necessity to investigate. So who knows? It's still early on, but
I would pay extra for it just so I know for sure. Even the people that want the flexi dragons, right? It's all secure, But that's I am on the odd side of the business where we are surrounded. Well, surrounded. Florida has a lot of military presence here. With locally here in Tampa, we have MacDill Air Force Base, which there's a fun conspiracy theory about them that they have a machine to push hurricanes out of the way, and this storm was looking to make landfall right there. And the other day, it just turned around, and now it's going up to the Panhandle. There's no way to prove they don't have it, but we haven't had a direct impact in Tampa in years. But recently, and this article just came out from 3dprint.com, that the U.S. Air Force is one of the largest funding bodies for 3D printing because the military is finally seeing the value in it. So this is awesome to see that you guys are at least considering it, because very few other companies have. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's more of like a not a technically not possible. It's more like a I don't want to deal with laws that I don't have to deal with things. So it's kind of one of those things that I just like don't want to get into it yet. I mean, once again, no one ever submits files to us if they're secret. So like if they're
Yeah.
too secret, they have their own print farms and they've got that figured out. So it's really just a matter of like, hey, I wish I could just wrap this up, throw it to you, and then I don't need to see any of that. I don't want to see any of that.
Yeah,
So
or they deliver it. That's
yep,
the other time. So we've received,
I've gotten
classified
flash
data.
drives.
They
Yep.
will literally come by in the most. It's like, could you guys be any less obvious that you're delivering something important like black SUVs? We've had a Humvee come by before. I'm like, you're not helping your. This is very obvious what's going on here. You could be a little bit, less obvious, but they'll deliver us a file. They watch everything. They verify, and they take it. They verify that it's been removed. We make it. They pick it up. Like there's a whole process. Yeah, government it's a different world to say the least. But I'm glad you're considering it. I understand why you're not putting a bunch of effort into it, but I'm glad that you're considering it.
Yep. So if anyone wants to jump in on that, just on our Discord, which is, I guess I'll put the link since I can put links in, is discord.polarfilament.com. If you just shoot me a message in there and just say, hey, I want to be part of we call it the print queue beta right now. So if you say, I want to be part of the print queue beta, then I will send you the invite link and you'll basically fill out all the custom branded, because everything's custom branded. So it'll be like upload your logo, upload your specific terms and conditions. If you want to overwrite ours, upload your specific like colors and materials that you use. Here's the pricing algorithm, type in whatever you want. So it'll kind of like walk you through that. And then after that, you're on your own.
It's awesome. Yep. All right. When we're done with this, throw me into it. Damn it, Mitch.
I think I can do the next giveaway as
Yeah,
well.
let's do it. Let's do it. Also, guys, I went 71 people here, 46 likes. We got to fix that. Mitch is giving you all the opportunity to get some awesome polar filament in your hands. That's worth a like on the video. Come on.
All right. I am doing.
Highly recommend. So it's getting warmer in here. So if you've been paying attention to the spool every time I hold it up, the spool is getting lighter and lighter and lighter throughout the podcast because this room is currently at 81 degrees Fahrenheit. It will probably hit 85 in the next hour or so.
It's darkest blue at like 70 Fahrenheit.
And yeah, I should have thrown it into the fridge 85. Before. I didn't think.
Oh, it's fine. All right, I'm going to send out the link again. I just cleared the responses because I don't know why, but I did. So if you've already filled it out, fill it out again right now. This will be for a $20 gift card this time.
Is that the same
link? Same exact link. Okay. I just cleared the responses from the first time because I didn't have it set to one response per, and I started watching duplicates come up. So I was like, I'm just going to clear them and we'll start all over. Now I have it limited to one. So
Liz says it's 85. Liz, is that inside or outside? It's 81 inside for me. It's hilariously, it's 78 outside according to it, but it is also outer bands of a big storm. Oh, it's inside. Oh no, Liz, I'm so sorry. That's not great. That's sweaty. That's sweaty weather. I'm sorry. That sucks. I'm sorry. You got to print less, Liz. you have like 6 room heaters. you gotta deal with it. So Mitch, what is like one of those things, looking back at it, you wish you would have done differently?
Looking back, would have done differently. White. So getting started with filament, the first thing that you got to do is you got to come up with some colors, right?
Yep.
So for anyone that's not familiar, there's entire companies that are very, very good at colors in general. Colors in plastics specifically, especially in the automotive industry. In the automotive industry, if you've got 2 different types of plastics and you had the same basically pigments to them, they can come out completely different. So you have to come up with different color formulations to get the same final result. So best way to describe that is you got a lot of plastic stuff in your car. Some of it's flexible, some of it's rigid, some of it's like ASA, some of it's TPUs now. You've got metals that you need to match and fabrics. All these different things need to be the exact same color. So that's where this really extensive color matching stuff comes into. So when you're hunting around and you want a red or a white, I didn't care if it was a very specific red because I'm like, hey, whatever one you give me first, it just needs to be consistent from that point on, and that's good with me. But it turns out that companies like overseas or even just out of the automotive industry, they'll sell you just a generic red. They're like, hey, we just got like a stock red.
Yep.
But the automotive industry, they're like, we won't touch it unless you give us a physical part because we're going to match not only the color, but also the shine and the transparency and a bunch of other things that don't even usually matter that much for a filament, even texture. Um, so we started with that. And for white, it was our one of our first colors. We did black, blue, and white were the first few colors. And it just so happened that they did have a white master batch. So like we have this thing, we just call it whitener. It's titanium dioxide for anyone wondering. And titanium dioxide is more or less, it's a very cheap white, but it is a very, very good white.
It's
So we got that.
brilliant white.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we bought a ton of it. I've never bought as much of any color that I've ever bought as much as we did white because it was cheap. And I didn't realize how much it mattered to actually send out my resin to have that matched because PLA is naturally kind of yellowed.
Yep.
And when you mix in white with yellow, you end up with a yellowed white. It is not a perfect white, especially if you hold it up to like a piece of paper or something like that. The problem is I bought enough to do like 500,000 spools of white or something like that. So I'm not getting rid of it until it's all gone, and we still have it to this day. But that one decision to not send out that resin it still has that effect. So I'm not very happy about my white because I could make it a much whiter white. But it is what it is. That's where we're going to be stuck with now for a minute. I've gotten a lot of people that say, "Hey, are you going to ever make like a whiter white?" I might. White's a very popular color, so I might go back and try to make that again. Generally, we've also been asked to make a blacker black, like a Vanta black, as much as we can. Luckily, black and white are the most popular colors, so I might have an easier time justifying that.
I
But
hate white filament so much. I hate white filament so much. It is truly the worst color. I'm sorry. It's terrible. I don't like white filament. I just, no. I don't. The brilliant white, I know it's beautiful, but it sucks because it shows every minor. White filament will show differences in diameter when you're printing it, and there's nothing you can do to stop it unless you're doing apparently that Clipper can do, unless you're doing it where you're tracking the diameter and ovality of your filament. White filament will show those deviations and it will piss you off and you will chase zeros on it. No, don't like it. It is a thing on the channel. I do not like white filament, and it bothers me that companies send white filament. Now they've learned and they're doing white filament with less pigment in it, so it's got some translucency to it, so it doesn't show a lot of the problems. But those opaque white filaments, man, they show so many problems that just aren't there, and newbies will start chasing printer problems that don't exist. So that's my rant on white filament.
oh yeah, I forgot. I actually am color matching a white right now because of specific opacity and stuff like that. It needs to be just right. So I forgot about that. That is in the works. I was gonna just try diluting our existing white first, but
and yes, WT Cook says they'll dirty white in like 2.5 seconds. Yeah, that's the other problem. You can't handle it very much. You can't handle the white.
This is the 30-second warning to put your name in for the drawing. We've got a bunch of responses already. I will drop the link one last time for anyone that wants to fill it out.
It's pinned as well, so it's in the pin. Yeah, it's in the pinned chat
there
message.
It is again.
Yeah, you're fine.
There's a good number of people that have been following this. This is cool.
Yeah, we got 75 people watching, 63 likes. Thank you all for showing up. This is, I knew this one was going to be a fun one. We've actually been trying to set this for a while, so I'm glad it worked out to where I was able to have like an intro episode where I talk about my knowledge on it. Then we bring in experts that can talk about the real knowledge on it, you know?
Oh, I clicked to spin. I didn't mean to spin it right away, but I did.
It's fine.
Here it is.
You don't have to click remove. So.
Oh,
who do we got?
Carl Blakemore. All right. That is a name I recognize. He's on Discord for sure.
Okay. Well, they have to comment. They have to comment in the chat. That's normally the rule. The rule is you got to be present in the chat.
Yeah, so say something in chat while I write down your name.
So
Oh, you knew John Olson, right? The
yeah,
last winner.
yeah.
All right. Because I just realized now I cleared the inputs, so I don't have his email. So
Well,
I should be able to, hopefully he did it this
did you
time
have it
too.
go to a Google Sheet?
Yeah.
The Google
I just
Sheet
got to make
doesn't.
sure.
The Google Sheet doesn't clear.
Oh, cool. All
Yeah,
right.
the Google Sheet doesn't clear, or it shouldn't. Mine don't. But yeah, I know John Olson. We can make it
All right,
happen
cool.
for you.
All right, so that one was the
We have a
20.
lot of people that identify as Carl in the chat right now. Duff says that he is Carl and so is his wife. John Olson's on Discord too.
Sweet.
Carl touched a llama. I don't know. Well, apparently we're all Carl. Where's Rick Grimes over here? Apparently John is in both of our Discords. So,
Beautiful.
yeah, John, just DM Mitch on Discord. Carl, come on, Coral, come on.
There he is.
There he is. All right, there's the. Yeah, you know what that is? It's because we have chat set to subscribers only, so he probably had a subscriber. It was about 60 seconds
Oh,
after
that's
we called
mean.
his name.
How do I add my name into that? You guys subscribe to both of us? No, I was kidding.
Hey,
I don't use YouTube.
You definitely do, but it's not under the Polar
Well,
Filament brand.
it's not Polar Filament. Yeah,
It should be, by the way.
Yeah, I had the microcontroller stuff long before Polar Filament stuff though. So I always do. My background is in software engineering, and I fell in love with robotics.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I just, once again, everything's born out of frustration. I just made videos about how much I hated moving from my knowledge base to a different knowledge base. And it turns out a lot of other people think that way too. So I just kept doing it. But
Yep.
that is for a different time.
I would love to see some. So you've done some filament based short form content on your personal YouTube page, and I only know this because I randomly scroll. I'm like, wait, that's Polar Mitch. That's not Polar Filament's channel. What? It's Mitch's channel. I would love to see more of that on Polar Filament because understanding more about the processes. There's a lot of turbo geeks like myself who just we want to absorb information as fast as physically and humanly possible. And apparently Carl said I was right. Ding ding ding. He wasn't subscribed.
Yep.
I'm sorry. You know, there's a translation bit here, but yes, go subscribe to Polar Filament. It's the pinned message. So go subscribe to Polar Filament, and maybe we'll convince Mitch to use the Polar Filament's account for his short form content that's filament related.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just nothing ever. I do post a lot of shorts to Polar Filament, but we have like 200 subscribers, and it never goes up, which is weird. So like, I don't really care too much about YouTube Shorts, but I use YouTube for long form content. So like, I did a hour-and-a-half video on how the RFID protocol works on Bamboo Lab spools.
Yep.
And then I diluted that down, or kind of like not diluted it, but I sped it up to be about 20 minutes as like a tutorial. So it's like, hey, here's how to do it on your own, which was long and explanatory. And then I took that one and dumbed that down to about a 2-minute video, which then I posted to short form stuff as well. Obviously, the shorter form stuff gets way more views, but I'm a tutorial guy myself. I like the explanations of it, not just how to click to do something, but that one that kind of crossed both worlds, because my background is I did a lot of RFID development stuff when I was working in robotics, so it was very cool to be able to apply that to 3D printing. I was really excited about that. I got to dust off all of the old tools that I used to use for reverse engineering RFID stuff, and I have very expensive equipment that hasn't been used in years, so it was cool to kind of try and use that one more time and then make another little video about it.
And you actually got pretty far into that too. You've gotten further than anybody else that I'm aware of when it comes to cracking that RFID system.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the point where it's more politics at this point, which is now that it can be done, the question is, should it be done, and should it be done this way? Is now where I'm kind of leaving off, because at the end of the day, I'm a company here. I'm still representing Polar Filament. I really don't want to step on toes and stuff. I don't want to upset Bamboo by doing something that they don't want me to like release or anything like that. I'm a huge fan of open source stuff, but that's really not my call to kind of get into that on somebody else's stuff. So at this point, I'm in the process of like talking to them to see if there's going to be a better way to do this. My fear is happening. The reason that all started is because, yeah, it would be very cool to have RFID on our spools. That would be a really cool,
That'd
just
be
like
awesome.
frill, I guess. It's not essential.
I think a
But
lot
my
of companies would
fear,
jump on this if Bamboo allowed it.
yeah,
Yeah.
my fear though is that somebody else was going to make something just like the Bamboo AMS with RFID, which would then have a different standard. And then you have that like that, I don't know, the dark era of
Now
kind
it's
of like
two
compatibility.
RFIDs, three
Yep.
RFIDs.
And that happened. So that's what Creality did now. They have their own RFID standard,
Do
which
they
was what
really?
I really did not want to happen. I wanted it to be like, I really wanted Bamboo to just open source theirs and say, hey, here's our protocol, follow this, and then everyone has to use our version. That would have been the most ideal thing. Then you
Yeah, they're not
never
gonna
have to
do that.
touch it. Plan B would be to have an open source version that they don't have control over, because that one they could have control over. Give me a sec. Roomba is about to go terrorize my downstairs.
You're good. I assume Mitch can still hear me, but you know, for those that know me know that I am also a huge proponent of open source. I love it. I want nothing but open source in here because I think it benefits the industry. I agree with your method here. So most people would say, well, but Grant, you don't like Bamboo. No, I think they serve a valuable purpose in this market. However, if Bamboo all of a sudden locks down their machines to only use their RFID controlled filament, F them. Throw the lever, Kronk, because at that point, now it is up to users to regain functionality of their machines. Now, would they do it? I don't know. Can they do it? Yes, they can. They can do that. And there's very little, unless you were going to re-spool filament onto their spools, there's very little that they could do to stop you. And I believe that their spools, they can monitor on their spools. I believe they can. I don't know if they currently are doing it, but I believe they can monitor how many times that RFID tag has been scanned.
You could on like, and they don't. Well, not that I know of. They don't, but they could. Nothing
Yeah.
is stopping that. To make sure that it's not being used enough. That being said, the AMS Lite, they changed the RFID reader. Instead of it being in a single point, it's now the entire spool itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the AMS Classic can actually tell how many cycles your spool has rotated. AMS Lite cannot. So that's probably something that changes. I just care about like
weird.
growth. Like there was that time when every 3D printer had a different firmware on it. They're like, hey, it's like when cell phones existed, and it's like, hey, we're creating a new operating system for every single cell phone that launches and stuff. And it's going to be scrapped after this one, and we're going to make a brand new one. They were all horrible.
Yep.
But then as soon as like a standard, free or not, or open source or not, you had iOS and you had Android, and they were like kind of standardized. And that's kind of like what we had with printers with Marlin and stuff. And now we have Clipper. And it's just something that is not necessarily open source, but at least something that people can say, I'm going to choose this as my platform. I'm going to follow these rules, these standards. And then I can officially say, I am a Marlin printer or I am a Clipper printer. I wish it was the same for RFID. There's my half
bars again.
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna let you finish your statement because I knew your statement should have been done in the time allotted, and it was. Yep. And Carl says, I think it is inevitable for the dark era of filament RFID. I don't know if Carl's been in the industry long enough to remember that's how it used to be. Da Vinci, right? XYZ printing with the Da Vinci. Sorry, XYZ printing. They had this, except their system was nowhere near as difficult as Bamboo's. You could reset the RFID or even just give it a fake RFID with an Arduino. And you were done, right? You didn't have to use their filament anymore, but their filament was like 3x the cost of anybody else's. And when you bought their very, very affordable printer, they were clearly losing money on the printer to make the money back on the consumables, which is a very common practice done in industry, right? If you lock it down to the consumables, you can sell the 2D printer for pennies on the dollar because you know that ink is basically more valuable than gold. Yeah, that's... I worry that that's possible. Will Bamboo do that? I think if they do, it would likely be one of the biggest PR blunders they could have, right? That would truly be a problem because they'd be kneecapping themselves. But there'd be print farms that have standardized on their machines that would be left with no choice but to do it, because replacing all of those machines becomes pretty much impossible from a financial standpoint, and the fact that it would have to be done overnight.
Yeah, I doubt that they would lock it down.
Yeah.
I mean, they could. I get that they have nothing stopping them from doing it, but I doubt that they would. I just think, because I know believe it or not, whatever, I know everyone has different opinions on them. They're a controversial company and stuff. They say that it's for quality. And honestly, if you are to take and you're to assume like no bad intentions, that is a pretty good way to quality control something. You're like, hey, if it has an RFID tag, it is from us. And if it is from us, that means that we got to control the quality on it. So now you really get to kind of like control that whole ecosystem. I like that they don't reject you from using other things like Stratasys was like that, XYZ DaVinci and stuff. They're like, we're not going to let you make a mistake. So Bamboo will let you make a mistake, which is cool. But the only part that makes me sad is that it's not just a genuine or non-genuine meter. It's not just, do we trust it or not? They also have some other cool features in there that I think would be nice to have. And also the option for new features that they don't have that could be implemented, because people have been thinking about RFID for a long time. But the only problem is that you have to convince a filament manufacturer to be high enough, like high tech, to be able to implement it. And you have to build a 3D printer company that actually builds a scanner that will read the same thing. You got to get a printer manufacturer and filament manufacturer to cooperate, and that's darn near impossible. That being said, they did it because they did both sides of it, and now it's like, hey, can we crack that open and let other people use it? One really cool thing that can be done with RFID is if you have a single sensor in one location, each time that it loops around, you now know how many rotations you've done. And a spool is going to spin a lot faster when it gets near its emptiness. It's going to spin a lot slower when it's full. So you can basically use that as a pseudo way to figure out how much filament you have left. And if you get really fancy with the math, you can get pretty darn accurate, because if you know the core size, and once again, it sounds like, oh, that's a lot of complications, but it's like, hey, guess what? Store that on the RFID tag. The RFID tag can report your core size.
It's a relatively simple bit of math as well. Yeah, I guess there's legal precedent around this. It's Lexmark International Inc. versus Static Control Components Inc. So there might be some legal precedent regarding that. But yeah, the thing that Bamboo has upset me about is Bamboo commits the cardinal sin that I don't like. They sell PLA that's not PLA. Their PLA is a high flow PLA. There's something else in it. What it is, I don't know. It's amazingly fast. It is insanely fast compared to regular PLA. That's how I know it's not real PLA. There's something else in it. What?
I'm gonna ruin one thing for you. Most of the high flow versions of things that I've seen so far tend to be more pure PLA than just the normal versions of it. So
I have a lot of pure PLA here. It doesn't print anywhere near as fast as theirs does. So it doesn't smell the same. Like is it Inigo or Ingeo? I always get that. Huh?
Ingeo.
Okay. The Ingeo 4043D, which is like the standard, has a smell to it. And that smell is obvious. And yes, the resin that you use to color it can either mask it or make it worse or make it more pleasant. But when PLA doesn't smell like PLA, there's something else in it. Now, do I know what that is? No, I don't have the capabilities to do that. I am actively trying to get either a handheld, one of the handheld laser mass spectrometers, or a access to a big one that can give us real world knowledge of what is in this stuff. Because again, I care about being able to validate things. I love Bamboo's PLA, and it's a little expensive, honestly. But the ecosystem is nice. Those added features, the RFID, that is nice. But I'm unwilling to pay that for all of my other machines. What I'd rather do is pay a little bit extra, even if I got to pay Bamboo a little bit extra to open up the RFID and allow other RFIDs to do it, right? It's going to take somebody who wants to kind of make that communication. So I'm glad that you're heading that. I think that you're probably one of the better people to be heading that, because your intentions are pure and true. You're not just trying to give them the middle finger. You're trying to provide extra value for your customers and yourself at the same time, because you guys have a pretty serious bamboo farm.
Yep. Yeah. And I get, yeah, we have, I mean, we have like 35-ish bamboo printers. So it's not huge. My neighbor has a print farm too, like our neighbor at the industrial complex. He has hundreds and it's insane. Like he's very much all in on the 3D printing side of things, whereas we're more all in on the like prototyping electronics, harnesses and stuff like that, and filament. But yeah, I do try to take their the reasoning that they say that they're doing it is to maintain quality. So I'm like, all right, what do I need to do to assure them that I will hold a high quality? And hopefully all the other stuff that I've done with like the data collection and stuff like that shows that I actually do care about that stuff. So I'm hoping that that has a precedent, because I know they might be a little bit hesitant to open it up fully and just say, hey,
Of
anyone can
course.
do it, because then
Of
you can
course.
lie.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they would be willing to like take us on as like a guinea pig to see if we'll actually do what we are promising that we're doing. But I would love to see it open, at least from a genuine standpoint, like make the tag say, like they can still, the way, without going into all the details, they're digitally signed, which means that you can tell if it's genuinely, like if it's genuinely signed by Bamboo or if it's not. So it'd be cool if they just like, instead of rejecting tags that aren't digitally signed by them, if they at least accepted them, but then like said non-genuine, that would also be fine with me.
Yeah,
So
that's
like,
totally
I don't
fine.
care if you say we have bad filament because we're not genuine bamboo. That's fine as well. Just don't reject it all out. And that way you're not worrying about other people like copying your stuff or imposing or being counterfeit bamboo filament or something like that.
Because, like, it is a pain in the ass to go say, okay, I'm changing this out for PETG. Oh, I got to change the color so it doesn't get pissed off at me. And it does the purge volumes right. If I could just put the damn spool on there and it does it all on its own, and would say that it's polar filament, right? And say, user specified polar, polar filament. Fine. That, I would think. But I guess Bamboo's also doing the thing that I didn't expect them to do. I didn't expect Bamboo to go down this path of making so many filaments. Right? I expected them to take the Apple approach, which is we will produce first-party hardware, a few accessories, and that's it. You want anything else, go to these other companies that are certified to produce it. Because that would have made the most sense. But
Yep.
it hammers home that perspective of I don't think Bamboo's making a bunch of money on their machines, and I know they're making a bunch of money on their materials because I know what it costs to produce filament in the United States. So I can only imagine how much lower they're paying for labor and raw material cost in China, right? So they're making a lot more money there. And they've capitalized on this with their filament subscription models where they give you discounts. Phenomenal ways of capitalizing on that added profit margin that they have to play an economies of scale game. But yeah, there's always that back of my head that remembers HP being HP and doing HP things of that you don't use our inks, can't use the printer anymore, baby. I get that that's valuable from an industrial level, industrial 3D printers that you want DRM. We had a whole episode about is DRM good? Industrial printers, you want DRM. It is valuable. It guarantees consistency, and when there's not consistency, you go after the manufacturer, right? I, as the user of it, am not responsible. It is the manufacturer. But this is not that case. Bamboo doesn't do that. They have one printer designed for industry, and it's $1,000 more.
Yep. So at this
So,
point now, I got to
anyways,
reach out to Creality as the next thing, because
yeah,
I've been trying to like, I know a bunch of people that are close to Creality, but I don't know Creality reps directly. So that's one of the things I'm like kind of doing is I want to reach out to them, say, hey, this is what I did with bamboo stuff. Are you interested in?
yeah.
Because it sounded like I don't remember reading this myself. I just heard it from other people. It sounded like they were good with taking an open source or a standard approach, whereas bamboo was kind of like silent when that was talked about.
Creality
So they must
often
have
seems
more
to
open.
be because they I am painting with a broad brush here from my experiences with Creality as a company and as a user. Creality is much more likely to take an already existing standard and implement it than they are to develop their own, because they are focusing on getting as many machines out the door as possible. They will worry about the minutia of, like, turning on thermal runaway protection later on than they will. Now, of course, they're past that now. They're doing much better, but Creality seems to be a company that is focused on providing high value, low cost parts. And that likely means if their RFID, I would guess it's probably based on an open system. Like,
Yep.
why wouldn't it be? It's Creality. It would make total sense for them to base it on an open system.
Yep. So I got to get in contact with them. Everyone that I know still hasn't had a physical RFID chip in their hand, but I think those went out on like August 31st or something. I remember that date for some reason.
I don't have one
August
coming,
31st,
so
I mean, July 31st.
I can
don't
tell
remember.
you that I don't have any CMS stuff on the way.
All right.
Otherwise, buddy, I'd send you whatever you need. I've got RFID readers here too. I'm sure they're nowhere near as cool as yours, but I'm working with what I got, and I would be happy to help because I believe in the user being able to do, or I believe in the companies being able to add it to their filament. I think that would be just incredibly valuable. But now, if you have to add 2 different RFID tags, that starts to get expensive.
Yep. And actually,
with
somebody in
those-
chat mentioned an open source RFID tag, which is something that I just posted in the link. So the people that were making the open source firmware for Bamboo printers in general, same group of people, I met up with them, and then we kind of like brainstormed to come up with one of those. So if you look at that link that I sent and you scroll all the way down, there is now an open source RFID standard. It exists, but it hasn't been adopted by anyone other than, well, actually, I got to update like the link on there. There's a few other filament manufacturers that have gone through all this and stuff, but it doesn't mean anything until a printer adopts it itself. So
Yep.
it exists. It can be copied, but to my knowledge, it has not. So maybe Creality did, and I just didn't hear about it, but I doubt it.
It would be nice to see companies trying to adopt that, because I think it benefits their users. Now, I can see the company side of it where, well, if we can't control the materials, we're making less money. I can certainly see that. But I would think that it would benefit their user base, because their user base is more likely to buy it because they can use their favorite filament brand and not lose features. Thankfully, from what I can tell, at least on the X1 Carbon, using real bamboo filament on their spools and all that doesn't gain you a whole lot of extra features currently. So when you use non-RFID spools, you're not losing a bunch, right? But I could see this being an issue if it was the case of, oh, you lost like crazy amounts of functionality by using a third-party spool. Like Formlabs does this with their open material license. You lose functionality in the machine. The wiper doesn't move on the Form 2. It didn't move anymore. I don't know if on the Form 3, and the Form 4 is, I haven't played with it yet. So, but it would be nice to see companies adopting open standards. Because quite frankly, it would reduce their time to get things to market. So, we'll see. Does any Cubic have one? Have RFID in theirs?
Not, I haven't touched that.
Okay.
I don't know, because I do remember, I thought somebody said FL Sun, but it might have been any Cubic. I remember like while I was writing the original documentation for an open source RFID thing, somebody mentioned another brand, and it like went in one ear out the other, and then like later on I was like, who said that and who are they talking about? Can I do some digging? So I'm not sure if they do or not, but it's kind of annoying. Like one of the really important but also seemingly unimportant things is where the tag goes on the spool.
Yep.
It measured from the outer edge of the spool or from the center of the spool. Because if it's on rollers, it matters how far it is from the outer edge of the spool. If it's on a center spool, it matters how far it is from the center. And that's like a little thing that, to standardize it, we need to know where to put that tag. So like those are little in like details that are a lot harder to change from a manufacturer standpoint. So like if Creality launched theirs and it's reading from a different location on the spool than Bamboo, well, guess what? Now it can't have a commonality between the two unless one of the two people redesigns their AMS or CMS.
Yep.
So weird things to go on there. But AMS Lite would be fine because of how they did theirs. That was brilliant, honestly, the way that they did their coils. So
I haven't used it yet. I am I'm currently debating if I want to put another bamboo machine in this office or not. Currently I'm opting not to, but the A1 with that AMS light, man, that is a really tough value to beat these days. You're gonna struggle to beat it from any other brand. Andreas Grunler is saying that Anycubic has RFID tags on their filament for their Cobra 3 combo. So anecdotally, we have someone saying that it's accurate. So be curious to see how they do it.
Yeah, I would have to go peek at it. I'll go buy a spool or something and see what's on it.
Yeah, I think they're starting to ship them too. Last I checked, they had started shipping these combo units. I'm glad to see more companies following suit, or let's just be real, they're cloning bamboo for the AMS, because the AMS, I guess someone that has used a lot of multi-material, multicolor printers, is one of the best implementations of a multicolor 3D printer that I've ever used. Like, it is compact. It works most of the time. I wish it had broader spool compatibility, but dude, like, from just a out of the box experience, it's pretty damn good.
I'm going to throw out a prediction, because I predict that the AMSs are going to phase out. I think that one of the big barriers to entry was being able to do multicolor printing, and that's what the AMSs have done.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the very first things everyone learns, which is great from the filament manufacturing standpoint, is that they make a lot of waste.
Yep.
And I think it's really funny, because I know like the Prusa XL gets a lot of hate for being expensive, and somebody's like, hey, why would I spend that much money on such an expensive printer when I can spend a couple $100 on a bamboo and get the same experience? Different targets. The question is, are you trying to get into it for as cheap as possible, or are you trying to run it for as cheap as possible? Because that filament waste adds up really, really fast. I mean, just like, you get kilograms and kilograms of waste.
And there's no good way to recycle it right now.
Yep. Which I have a video on coming out eventually. I'm going to be doing something like that, because that's always the most common thing. I get so many emails. Can I send you my filament poop? Can you turn it back into filament? The answer is no, and I'm tired of typing up an answer, so I'm going to do like a either a short form or a long form video showing why, and not just explaining and saying like, I did this. I'll be like, here, this is what it looks like. You can decide for yourself.
You know, it's funny. Yeah. That's why we started our YouTube channel, was because we used to get the same 10 questions every single time. We said, all right, we're going to make a 10-episode podcast. That's going to be it. Episode 198. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's how you fall into another full-time job. So be careful there, Mitch. You're going to find yourself another full-time job being the next, 3D printing nerd over here.
I'll just be the second Musketeer. And then you just got to get a third one.
we actually, our company was started by 3 people.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You got to get all 3 on camera then.
No, there's only, well, the 2 that are still in it have, yes, they have. It's my brother. He just looks a lot like me because we're identical twins.
Have I talked to your brother?
No, you'd never talked to my brother. When was the last time my brother was on the channel? I was scanning something. It was a scanner. What scanner was it? I think that was the last time John was on the channel. It's been a while. He doesn't live here anymore, so it's he just bought a house, so he's not around to show up on camera anymore. But episode 200, maybe we'll bring him in. I'm trying to book Frankly Built for episode 200, because Frank was episode 100.
That's what I heard. Yeah, I heard you talking about that.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I guess I got to get him for. I feel like I have to get him for 200, right? I feel like that you have to do it that way, right? But yeah. So it's crazy that we're going to be hitting 200 episodes of this damn podcast.
Yeah, just answering those FAQs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like the Prusa XL approach, though. It feels like it's a step ahead. It feels like, I'm sure that somebody at Prusa looked at it and they're like, okay, here's 2 different ways to do it. 1 is we switch colors and we purge, or 2 is we don't do any purges. And it just feels like they're a step ahead to something that we haven't quite gotten to yet.
Prusa has both. They have the MMU3. It's like,
yeah,
that's their implementation of the AMS-ish. From my understanding, and I have one, I'm going to be building it and trying it on camera live for people. My understanding is it is not anywhere near as plug and play. The XL for me has been pretty much flawless. There are some things that I don't like about it. I don't think its cooling is adequate. And so we are developing a better system for that. I don't know if Prusa will beat us to market. I don't know. But, you know, they have a lot more throughput when it comes to design than we do. But yeah, for me, and Catlet mentions it, it's not even the multicolor that I care about. It's dissimilar materials,
Yep.
right? It's PLA with PETG or, you know, TPU embedded into it. And with a single nozzle multicolor, dude, it is so much purging. And especially when you're doing dissimilar materials, if your purge volumes aren't freaking perfect, you have a huge problem. Things,
Yep. Even colors, like how long you have to purge. Like
yeah,
our
bleed.
white takes forever to fix. And it's just, once again, Bamboo showed that there is a lot of value to convenience and simplicity. Like you can do everything on an Ender 3 that you can on a Bamboo,
Yep.
but it's just a matter of how much time you want to spend tweaking it and going into the settings. So that falls in that same category. Is like the one thing you still have to tweak is the bleed amount and stuff, how long you want to purge between materials. And that goes away with the tool changers. I just think it's one of the things is I knew before even getting one how much waste they were going to generate, but it's until it's sitting in front of you that you go, oh, okay, yep, I get that now. Like,
Yep. I have a few filament boxes just full of bamboo poop, and
yep,
it's so frustrating. It's like we keep all of our PETG scraps, all of our PLA scraps, and we separate them. So they're all separated into different bins because they're I am aware of some methods using organic processes to be able to break down these plastics and turn them into, you know, bio waste, or, you know, turn them into compost and all of that. There are processes that are being worked on that are not the traditional ones that we are aware of. And I'm like, all right, I want to implement this into our shop. I want to be able to use it. That is, you know, that's what I would like. Cause I hate this waste problem. But with the purging, if you're purging out PETG and putting in PLA, that little bit of bamboo poop, garbage. Because it's now non-recyclable.
yep.
So yeah.
Just curious, did you try that PHA yet at all?
No,
Did you get PHA? All right.
It's drying.
All right.
It's drying because unfortunately UPS decided to abuse the hell out of the box, and the vacuum seal broke, and it was sitting outside in the rain for hours, so it's currently drying. I did find out a fun thing with the Polymaker dry box. So I have one of them running outside in my garage. At level 1, it can't dry filament. It's not possible. The ambient moisture is seeping into it through just like random cracks and all that faster than it can dry it. Level 2, I can't get below 30%. And inside on level 3, I can't get below 20%. So it's a nice little system, but yeah, that's been a fun one. I'm going to be reaching out to Polymaker about that to say, okay, I would say for version 2, we got to have like a seal on everything, because that's a weird problem I didn't expect to have. I'm like, oh, this is a great one to use in my garage because it's really tiny, and the box storage system is nice. But yeah, I have them in a Sunlu S4 right now. All the ones that didn't survive the shipping are all in a Sunlu S4, currently being baked. But PHA
Just as a heads up, it bakes at a lot lower temperature than PLA.
Yeah.
So don't overdo it. The first time we did it, we're like, all right, let's try the drying temperatures. And we had our giant hopper, and it just solidified into a giant brick. And we're like, oops, we dried it a little too hot.
Yep.
So we had to lower it.
I'm at 50C right now.
Yeah. For anyone that's not familiar, PHA is a relatively new material to the 3D printing world in general. It's very new to us as well. You've probably heard that PLA is biodegradable, and then somebody immediately follows up telling you that it is not biodegradable because it has to have very specific conditions like heat and pressure and all these other different things. PHA seems to be what PLA promised to be, which is a biodegradable material that if you let it sit long enough, it will eventually degrade. You can throw it outside in the dirt and stuff. I haven't confirmed this yet. I do know the company that is sending the pellets that have done all these testings, and not only testings, but certification. So it's certified marine biodegradable, meaning you can throw it in the ocean. I don't know. They told me, I just don't remember the answer of how long you need to let it sit. To my knowledge, it's in like weeks, as in like 10 to 30 weeks or something for it to degrade. So it's not fast. It's not like you throw it out and go check on it in a week and then it's gone. But we're kind of repeating a lot of those tests just so I can be a little bit more familiar with it. So like printing something and putting it on my desk for a long time, putting something outside, burying it, throwing it in the water, trying to see how it behaves. But at this point, still super early on the testing. But honestly, I was surprised. I expected there to be issues with printing because I know there's other like soluble materials. But it didn't take very long to tune in. The first ever print that I just did with PLA settings and it came out totally fine. It had a little bit of warping, so I just kind of tweaked a few things to get that. But I didn't expect any working print. So I'm pretty excited about this to see how it turns out. And I'm really curious what you think about it, Grant, because I know you've tested like tons of materials in general. So it's nice to have an experienced set of eyes on something. And
I've played with PLA PHA blends, and it's actually what I think Polymaker is using for Polyterra, or now the Polychroma, I think is what they're calling. I don't know. They rebranded things. I've always liked PHA in filament. It has a weird texture to it, but it does, at least in my experience of the known PLA PHA blends that were sold as PLA PHA blends, it is so smooth to print. It tends to be beautiful. The polychroma matte, thank you. Panachroma matte. Thank you, Liz. It's beautiful to print. It's smooth and buttery. It's a very weird way to describe it, like I would describe food. But PHA, it's just a different material. I've never printed with pure PHA, so I am excited to try that out. And yes,
yeah, the
we have
funny
a full
thing about
kilo.
that is even just our colorants adding, depending on what the colorants are, would ruin the certified marine biodegradable side of
Yep.
things. So
Yep.
I might have to come out with, I'll probably start with normal colors and stuff. So like, I don't know to what degree that will ruin that, but I do want to at least get some things out there. And then I'll have to go back though and use some more naturally derived pigments and colorants and stuff like that, and binding agents and carriers. But
I think I'm
it
gonna have to
is
print
iffy.
some chanclas, otherwise known as sandals,
Yep.
with the PHA. So then when I go down to Miami, I can have my grandmother throw it on camera, and I can use that in a bit. Where that's how we keep hurricanes from hitting Florida. We have all the Cuban ladies and Latinas throw their chanclas at the hurricanes, and it could actually be that. I might do this for a bit, and then drop it into a fish tank for months and see what happens, because I have some empty tanks here at the house that we could totally do that with. Both, and I could go to the beach and get salt water too. I could test marine biodegrading, but the problem with that is that water will slowly evaporate and the salt environment will get higher and higher and higher. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I like the idea of PHA. I worry that it's going to be tough for it to catch on because it is so different than PLA, but we'll see. It would be
Yeah,
nice.
it's made with a completely different process. So it's
Yeah.
not the same set of equipment. You definitely need specialized equipment to manufacture it. That being said, to print with it was surprisingly simple. I still got to figure out how it holds up over time. So, like, if you've got a spool of PHA and you let it sit on your shelf for a year and then you go to print with it, what happens? I won't know that for a year. So that's one test there. I also do want to verify that, like, if it is biodegradable, that it actually does at least biodegrade to some point. I know there's certifications, but I want to see it with my own eyes.
Yep.
And then printability. Oh, there's my half hour mark. Um, in terms of printability, it is harder to print with, probably in a similar way to
Yeah.
how PETG is harder to print with than PLA. Like when PETG was starting to become popular, everyone said, this is the PLA killer. Everyone's going to switch over to PETG. It's stronger, it's recyclable, it's better in every single way. Yeah, it's just harder to print with in like a really awkward kind of way, to the point where people that do print with PETG normally are just like, hey, it's totally easy, you'll be able to figure it out. I'm like, it is different. It is different. There are
It is.
changes.
Yeah, it's like ABS light. It
Yep.
warps a little bit, you can print it in a slightly hotter environment. Yeah, look, we could have printed these out of PETG all day. We did them out of PLA. Why? Because the PLA works. The only one that's failed is that one. It's the one that's always on camera. Is the only one that's ever failed. Well, failed and didn't completely drop the spools. The spools haven't fallen yet. That one is made out of Polyterra because something, and it's heavier. Polyterra is also more dense. Sorry, not heavier, it's denser.
Yep.
I don't know if PHA is more dense than PLA. That's not something that I know yet, but
I do believe it's way less dense.
you guys are doing something fun with recycling too. Can you talk about that?
I mean, I'm always exploring ways to recycle.
No. The nylon.
Oh, the nylon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one's fun. We have a lot of access to nylon powder because once again, we're in the industrial world, and it turns out a lot of industrial printing is SLS instead of FDM. So they're working with powders instead of filaments. So there's a lot of powder waste that is literally like the definition of what microplastics are. It is the microest of microplastics that exist.
Uh-huh.
So we basically have this little negative free roll of being able to try to recycle this. Like if it works, cool. If it doesn't, nothing is changing from my standpoint. So we did a few attempts to try to turn powder into pellets and then pellets into filament because you can't just go directly there. And it actually worked out pretty nice. I wasn't expecting it to work out. I was surprised. So I have the first few spools up on our website still. I actually made a lot because it sold out in 15 minutes after me posting that it was available. So literally from the time that I sent you your link, because I was like, hey, here's the link, to the time that I actually got around to like I don't know, updating something, it was already gone. So I had to like allow negative sales for the first time and make sure that people could buy more than we actually had in stock. We made more the next day, but it prints like nylon. Nylon is harder to print than other materials,
Nylon
but it doesn't print worse than new nylon. So it's surprisingly strong, and it worked fine in a printer with an enclosure. So once again, this is a thing where I have, at least from my scale of things, an infinite supply of nylon that I might start turning into filament. And it's expensive nylon. It's nylon 12, which is outrageously expensive. So if I were to make this raw, I'd be listing it probably at double the price that it is right now. But since I have free material, then I can list it at a much cheaper price for nylon 12. So if you're interested in that and you do industrial stuff, go check it out. It's not filled with anything. There's no like glass filler or carbon fiber filler or anything like that. So I know those are common with nylon, but
well, it's also common in the powders. Well. I'd be curious if your powder is also pure nylon 12, or if it is going to have some glass. Well, you'll know if it has carbon in it, but it might be difficult to determine if it has glass in it.
My guess is that it doesn't have glass because most of the glass is glass fiber, and you can visibly see this glass fiber.
In SLS, it's glass bead.
Yeah, I guess so. I doubt it only because of how smooth and buttery it extrudes when we're making it. So
fair. You'd see it.
That's my guess, but I don't have a confirmation on it. That being said, I do know where the material is coming from. So like, I'm sure that if they were putting glass in it, they wouldn't not tell you because that's a selling point. So
that's fair.
I'm guessing that they would have they'd be like, hey, it's nylon 12 with glass.
So. I'd be very curious if you could re-extrude nylon 12 with glass, and how similar it would be to a nylon 12 glass filled from only a few companies that make it. And 3DX Tech is pretty much the only one that I know of, and they're relatively local to you.
Yeah, they're opposite side of the state. So we're on the Detroit side, they're on the Grand Rapids side. So
you guys can do the hand thing. We don't do that here in Florida. It doesn't look like
we're here. They're here.
Yeah, Matt, who was the owner, I don't know if he's still operating it, but they were bought. Matt and I were very good friends for years. They've been, for a very long time, my go-to place for exotics. I do not buy anything from them other than exotics. They are way too expensive for anything else. But exotics,
that's their thing.
Yeah, exotics.
They are the exotics people, so it's very cool what they're doing. I still haven't gotten a chance to meet them because they go to different events than I do. I don't cross onto that side of the state very often, so I'm not hopping in there. I do know that from the industrial side, they have there's something called Automation Alley, which is local to our area. It is simultaneously a company, but also like an organization that you can be a part of. And they're doing I don't know if it's like a tour or what, but I think it's coming up next week, actually. I think it's like August 15th, if I had to guess. So if anyone's in that side of the state, search for Automation Alley and 3DX Tech, and they're doing some sort of event. I don't remember if it's free or not, but they're doing something. I get emails about it all the time.
I would say my conversations with Matt, he has always been incredibly open and wanting to talk, and just like I've had 3 hour long phone conversations with him. Never invite him to the podcast. I should probably change that. But it's the thing that I love about this industry. There's never been a company that I could call on the phone that wouldn't want to talk to me for hours about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and just kind of share it with somebody else who's also passionate. Like, they're not giving away any secrets, but it's not often that we are surrounded by other people that are fundamentally passionate about what we do and how we do it. Like, when we featured your Archimedes screw fail on Print Fix Friday, I didn't know that you were going to film like a whole little bit. I was thinking, oh, a couple of photos would be awesome. No, you went and filmed like a whole bit. And that was awesome. And I know that you did this because you are passionate. And it's like this industry is full of passionate people that have been shown throughout their lives that nobody likes passionate people. I'm here to tell you that we love passionate people. Passionate people are awesome. Stay passionate.
I see somebody said that I used the wrong hand. I knew that was going to happen as soon as I did it. I was like looking at my screen. I'm like, am I mirrored or not? And I'm like,
your
oh,
mirror, well. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the right. It was your correct hand, but it was the wrong hand for the stream.
That side and that side.
Yeah,
it looked great on my screen. You should be over here.
Yeah. This is mirrored. Because most cameras mirror the image naturally, so we have to re-mirror it back for it to be correct. So it does take a long time to like be able to like point at things in the background, because movement for me is weird versus what my expectation is. It's like when I go to point up at the XL, I sometimes have to like get it in there, because like my hand is 10 feet away from the printer easily, right? Like, because it's at a diagonal. But yeah, I do love that XL. There's some awesome stuff coming that we're working on for that XL. I am so excited. But yeah, tool changing. I'm gonna play around with that nylon and see if I can print it in open air. I doubt I can.
Try open air. That'll be tough.
I'm gonna try it. I've got some thing. Nope, I can't say it yet. I have some things that I am testing for a company that we are under embargo for. That will be out of embargo in 2 days. But we are testing some things on embargo. So it's like, it's a test. It's a test plate. I can do whatever I want with it. If I destroy it, I destroy it. So I'm going to try that with the nylon and see what happens. Because yeah, nylon, if you don't have an enclosed printer, can have a bad time. Generally speaking, can have a real bad time. But I love that you guys are taking that, what is basically waste, and there's not a great way to really recycle it because it is so fine. You basically have to remelt it, then chop it back up, then re-extrude it, and those heat cycles degrade nylon.
I was gonna say it has a melt history to it, so
Yep.
matters how much you do. So luckily, the place that we're getting it from, they will say who they are eventually. I just can't say it yet. They're waiting for like a PR type thing. They're probably gonna make like a big old news article, like, "Hey, we're getting rid of our waste." But until that, I'm gonna leave that unsaid. But they're very picky about their quality already. So the stuff that they're giving us is like really good nylon. Like if I was using this personally, I would use it a lot more times than they're actively using it. But so that also helps quite a bit. I'm not like getting the stuff that's been heated up and recycled like 50 times. They're doing it like once or something. They like use it for a couple of prints and then it's gone. But that's nice too.
That is industry versus prosumer, right? Industry says we are not going to risk reusing this more than a time or two. We need to just deal with our refresh rate. Let's do a 40% refresh rate. And, because to them, they're making enough profit. They don't give a shit. It doesn't matter. They don't care if they're using, 20 kilos or 200 kilos. They're buying it at such large quantities that 20 kilos of nylon powder is a rounding error. If that, it's a rounding error. And that's kind of why I love powder printing, because you can get really good stuff. And there are some big powder printing companies locally that I can source their used powder from for Not free. You got a great deal, but I can source it for considerably lower than what I can get the real stuff for. Their problem locally is that they do a lot of very fine parts. So they said, yeah, you're going to have to sieve it or sift it to make sure that there's no like printed particulate in there before you go and use it. But
I didn't even think about that. I have not been sifting any of my stuff. Oh, it probably wouldn't matter because I'm doing it. If I do it twice, if there's one thing in there, it probably just gets melted just the same.
with the
So,
way that the screw works, I assume it's slowly melting anyways, so it shouldn't matter.
yep. If anyone didn't know, though, a fun fact about how plastic melts in the screw is it doesn't melt by being heated. It melts by friction. So that's one of the reasons why powder is so hard to melt is because you really got to crank the temperatures. You do have to rely on it heating from the barrel when you're working on a powder because normally you're scraping a pellet along the outside of the barrel, and that scraping creates friction. That friction creates heat, and that's what creates the melt. The only reason that you actually heat your barrel in the first place is to make sure it doesn't just freeze when it sticks to the barrel. So you want to make sure that once it is melted, it stays melted. But that's all the heat that you're doing. That gives you a much more higher pressure, more consistent flow and stuff like that. So that's something that I think is funny because when you look at like the fill extruder, it is not that. The fill extruder is 100% heating up the end of it, and you're trying to push stuff through the hot zone.
It uses an auger drill bit. Like, yeah, it's not the proper Archimedes screw thing. It works. It's archaic. I mean,
yep, I still have one. Collects plenty of dust just fine.
Yeah, we love you, Tim. Tim, you should be a podcast guest. You're not. I don't think you're watching this, but Tim, if you are, you should be a podcast guest, and we should talk about the fill extruder.
Honestly, that would be perfect because like that is this. I do not know a filament company that does not have one. Everyone starts with that
because they're all like, "Can we actually do this ourselves?" Crap, we actually can do this ourselves. Okay, let's take a loan out. We need to spend 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand, whatever it is to buy a filament line these days.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just
but hey, they are the kickstart. They are that common idea that everybody has. I like to equate that to like PLA recycling too. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of those things that when you haven't done it yourself, you come up with this idea of what it would look like in your head. And then until you actually try it, then you go, oh, now I get why this hasn't happened or why it doesn't work the way that I think it is and stuff. So hopefully when I make that video, that'll answer some of those questions in the same way that I didn't understand what filament manufacturing was like with until I got the fill extruder and go, oh, all right. It turns out it's a little bit more complicated than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. I love this, man. I know that we could talk for hours, but we have gone well over our 2-hour allotted time. So
I should probably do the last drawing and then call it here.
Yeah, I think so. So we got 68 people watching, 67 likes. Can we get to 69 likes, please? Because we need a nice number of likes. I only need 2 more. I swear if you all go over, I'm going to be upset. Amber says 1 more, but I see 67 on my side.
I know it's already pinned, but I just dropped the link for the last giveaway, which will be a $30 Polar Filament gift card.
Which is good for a spool and pretty much shipping it to you. More or less.
Yeah, that should more than cover. It depends on what spool you get to, because like we do have like PHA, which is a bit more expensive.
They went over.
Stuff like that. So that's why I'm doing gift cards instead of spools, because pick out what you want. Oh, and actually, even if you got the lower dollar ones, the new thing that we just launched was the like color swatch kits.
Yeah.
So those are $5. Those have been highly requested. I just didn't want to deal with it before because it ends up being a giant pain. Every time we launch a new color, then I got to go launch it as a color swatch, and I got to do all this other like extra work to get it launched. We finally did that though, so you can get all 36 or 37 colors of PLA. So we just did the PLA color swatch kit. But now when you hear me talk about like, oh, our fluorescent yellow is just a little bit more see-through than our regular yellow. Now you can have both of them in your hand at the same time. So those are a great way to use the smaller dollar amount gift cards if you want to go that route.
I wish you had those up when I made my order, because dude, I would have done it. I love, like, it's dumb, but I love that Bamboo did it too. The color swatch kits are amazing. I wish more companies would do it so that you can see at a glance what color the brand can have. Like for me as a business owner, like if I'm on a Zoom call, hey, this is one of the brands that we use. Here's all their colors. Is there one in here that you like the best? Rather than me having to send a bunch of website links, you know? That's just so valuable. And for the money, I might hold 10 or 15 of them in inventory. So one of our bigger clients that wants to place orders all the time, here's a color swatch kit. It's worth it for me to give it to them.
Yep.
I love that you guys are doing it. That is such a smart move. Such a smart move.
Yep, that is what the reason is for, though, for giving it out. Because industrial customers, it's worth it to give them something that's $5 for free if they end up ordering something. So that's applicable.
Dude, we have a client that we've worked with for years, and their UPS account number doesn't work anymore. It hasn't worked in like a year. So I've been eating the cost of shipping because it is not worth. It's not worth it. If $10 or $20 is the difference between profit and not profit, I'm not charging enough. I just eat the cost of the shipping because it's no big deal. Now, they're not ones that would get a swatch kit because what color they want. They don't care as long as it's not red, green, or yellow because they're painting over it. So they don't care. So they're like, yeah, whatever color you got, send it to us. Okay, done.
All right.
Yeah,
there are only a few submissions for the drawing this time compared to the last few times. So it either means
do they
that people
have to resubmit
it out. Yeah, I do have to resubmit again. I cleared it again. So if you already resubmitted once, go do it again. Oh no, I hope after clearing responses that people that already submitted once,
if they're in your
resubmit again.
Check your Google Sheet. Your sheet should show everybody.
All right, let's do that.
If you didn't tell it to give you a Google Sheet yet, all the old responses are gone, and you'll never get them back. I learned that the hard way.
Okay, it looks like people are able to resubmit.
Okay.
So that's good. All right. Now they're trickling in. Now everything's coming in. All right.
Rose Kindred said they clicked the link again. It says already responded. So I have no clue, man.
Who said that?
Rose Kindred.
Yep, they're already in it.
Okay.
Just want to make sure it's not telling you that you already responded when I cleared your response. All right. Yeah, now they're all trickling in. All right. I will pull up the last wheel. Let me share that.
And I think we're going to send people to Steve Builds when we're done.
All right,
we'll see what Steve is up to.
All right. I am going to pull the list. I'm still watching the number count up. I'm like, do I want to wait? All right. I will give everyone 10 seconds.
7, 6, 5.
It kills me that it's still going up because like every time I like highlight the list, there's like a few more names that trickle in.
I'm the same way, and it's like at some point I have to call it. I'll normally say, hey, when the clock strikes, whatever time, then we call it because like, sorry, the link's been there the whole damn time. There's only so much you can do.
I'm doing it this time. All right, here we go. Last one, $30 Polar Filament gift card goes to Mr. Yag Shagath.
Mr. Yag Shagath. I think they've won some from our other filament sponsor too, so that's pretty awesome. That's a $30 gift card, right?
Yep.
Damn, that's pretty good. But they got a comment. I know that they're subscribed. Oh, they're here. Awesome. So there they are. We got it.
The point of clearing it is that you have to be in here in the last couple of seconds. Ah, man, I keep doing that. There we go. All righty. I mean, that's good for me. This is fun. So I know we've been on for a long time, but if you ever want to chat again, I should always be available. I can always make time on Sundays. I've been traveling a lot, but now I can make time.
Hey, if there's ever anything that you want to talk about, dude, I'm always down. We love having guests on here, especially ones that are like hyper passionate. So like if you want to like when it becomes public who the company is that you're getting all the nylon powder from, we should do a deep dive on. That'd be a cool deep dive episode of like how you're turning microplastics into macroplastics and then microplastics again. Because 3D printing releases a lot of microplastics into the air, but we're not getting into that today. Yep. Will we see you at Printopia? Liz is asking.
Yes, I will 100% be there. We're doing the filament exchange again.
That is awesome.
So definitely bring that. I'm going to make sure I can get them to advertise it on the website because we did that at Rocky Mountain. They advertised it on the website and tons of people participated. I think we did like something around 700 spools were swapped. So if you're not familiar, you bring a spool of old filament that is good, but you're not going to use it anymore. Basically drop it off and exchange it for a different spool from somebody else. So it's a good way to like tinker around if you got like this weird multicolor silk that you liked, but then you printed with it and you decided you didn't like it. Now is your chance to give someone else a share of that suffering and pain by dropping it off and letting them try it out. So it's a good way to try that without having to buy a full expensive spool. Some people drop off really crazy exotic stuff that you probably never justify it. You'd be like, oh, I don't want to spend $120 on a spool. Someone might drop that off, and now you can try it. You can struggle through it, maybe decide I don't like it, or you do like it, and then you start using it.
I think it's a
So we
cool
tend to
system.
find a lot of that weird, the like dust collecting filament, the stuff that was popular at one point in time that everyone wanted to try but didn't use a full kilogram of. So I will tweet it, Pezliz. So that'll be the first ever tweet will be the announcement for the filament exchange. But yeah, bring filament for that. I'm probably going to contact anyone and everyone that has some sort of social media presence to ask them to repost it as well, because I'm trying to make it not a Polar Filament event, but just like a rep festival event. So I try to step back from the branding side and be like, hey, doesn't matter who's doing it, drop it off. I'm not trying to force you to buy our stuff. I don't want it to look that way. But we will be at the like influencer booth. So there's like a booth for just influencers. So that's where the filament exchange is going to be.
Sweet. There's a booth for influencers?
Yeah, if you're not already going, I think Courtney was the one organizing that. She basically went and like bought up like 3 or 4 booths or something
yeah,
like
she
that.
normally does that.
She's like, this is going to be for all the YouTubers that like can't justify it on their own or something. I know she's asking. I mean, this goes for anybody that's like some sort of an influencer. I know she's already bought it, but she is asking for like if somebody wants to come to like chip in a little bit. She had a bunch of people that were originally on board and then had to drop out last minute. So it's basically an opportunity to split a table instead of buying your own table. So you can always reach out to Filament Stories for that.
Nice. Well, Mitch, where can the people find you? Where can they find your awesome made in America filament and, be able to potentially get some good discounts too?
Regular website is just going to be polarfilament.com. That has the link to the filament as well as all of the other links to everything else that we do. The one that I spend most time on is Discord, which is discord.polarfilament.com. That is where I post all the discounts, all the weird R&D stuff, whatever I try and fail. So like I was saying earlier, the silks are going for like less than what it cost us to actually make them right now. I think they're like 60% off or something. And as soon as those are all gone, then I get to try to make silkier silk filament. So then I'll try the next batch of R&D. So there's that, as well as the other R&D stuff is like PHA and nylon as well. I think I got still discounts that go until the end of the month on those ones. So you can check them out there.
Nice. That's cool, man. Hey, guys, go check out Polar Filament because honestly, it's some really nice stuff. Mitch is obviously big into a part of this community and is trying out things that I've never seen other companies even bother. Like, the fact that you're turning nylon powder into filament is still mind-blowing to me. Mine's going to take a while for it to be usable, but that's okay. That's not your fault. This bag had friggin' water in it. But hey, that's life and how things go sometimes. I am excited to try it. I'm excited because you have all these, like everyone makes the same generic friggin' colors and I don't like it. And you all said, no, we're going to make cool colors. We're going to make badass blues that are also fluorescent. And like,
I still had to make the dumb colors first, though. You can't make
know.
fluorescence until you have dumb colors first.
But I bought the fluorescence, okay? I know what I like. I like if I'm going to 3D print something, I want it to stand out. I want it to be cool. And I love how at your booths, when you guys do booths at shows, you've got the black lights or the 455 nanometer LED lights to show that your filament is fluorescent, that the fluorescence is not always the color that it looks like. That is awesome and a great way to show those differences, right? I really do love that. Mitch, huge thank you for coming out, spending the better part of 3 hours here live, hanging out with some awesome people. But we are going to send them to go see and hang out with Mr. Steve Builds. But the question is, do you know my outro?
No, I don't know your outro.
Okay. Well, that is all we have for you all today. This has been episode 198 of the Making Awesome podcast. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one.